All right, good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 21st Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. My name is Clay Alsop. I'd like to start with opening statement. The Planning and Zoning Commission is composed of Peoria citizens who have been appointed by the City Council to serve on the commission as a civic responsibility without compensation. Our duty is to study and review the planning and zoning issues within the City of Peoria. The Commission holds public hearings or may conduct a study session on a topic. Decisions made by the Commission on general plan amendments, rezonings, and text amendments are forwarded as written recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will consider the recommendation of the Commission and make the final determination. The City Council may concur with the decision, modify it, overturn it, or remand it back to the Commission for further consideration. For conditional use permit applications, the Planning and Zoning Commission will act as the determining body and may approve, deny, or continue the application. Any member of the public may appeal the decision of the Commission to the City Council regarding a conditional use permit. The appeal must be written in writing to the Planning and Community Development Department within 15 calendar days of the date of the Commission's decision. Due to the updated guidance received from CDC regarding COVID-19 protocols in the workplace, all city employees and visitors should wear facial coverings inside of city buildings, including the council chamber, regardless of vaccination status. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting remotely may do so by viewing a live stream broadcast on Facebook at facebook.com/City of Peoria AZ, as well as on the Digital Peoria channel on YouTube. The meeting is also broadcast on Cox Channel 11 and CenturyLink Channel 8509. Additionally, the posted agenda online invited citizens with comments or questions on any agenda item to submit those by 5 p.m. in advance of the meeting. If you have comments or questions following tonight's meeting, you may submit those to the Planning Department by emailing planning@peoriaaz.gov. In the interest of maintaining a fair and efficient hearing, the Commission will adhere to the following steps during tonight's meeting. Each case will be called in the order in which it appears on the agenda unless otherwise announced. Chair will open the case. City staff will provide a brief report and recommendation. The applicant is then invited to give a presentation. The chair will read the submitted testimony provided by the public in advance of the meeting. After all the testimony has been taken, we will invite the applicant back up to provide any final comments. Finally, we will have a commission discussion and decision. And that concludes our opening statement. Let's begin tonight with the roll call. Commissioners, please indicate your presence after I call your name. Commissioner Fighter.
Present.
Commissioner Grice. Commissioner Hutchinson.
Present.
Commissioner Nelson.
Present.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Present.
And Commissioner Waitman. And Chair is present. This is the final call for speaker forms. If you would like to address the Commission tonight, please fill out a speaker request form. We have them available just outside the entrance to the chambers and up front at the podium. Next is consent agenda. The consent agenda is for items that are routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. Item 1C, disposition of absence. Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion on 1C?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Consent.
Thank you. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 6, regular agenda, unfinished business from our previous Planning and Zoning Committee meeting. Item 2R, Park West PAD. That'll be followed by 3R Grand Commons Specific Area Plan Amendment and 4R Grand Commons PAD. We will have a 5 to 10 minute break after 4R. Staff, please present your report on 2R.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission. It's been a while since I presented to you, so I figured I'd take up half the meeting. Park West is a development at the northeast corner of 99th Avenue in Northern. Really, it consists of 3 parcels. As you can see here on the screen, parcel 1 is what typically would be referred to as the commercial portion or what folks classically think of as Park West. Immediately to the east of that, you have view at Park West Apartments, which is parcel 2, and then parcel 3 is what we're here for tonight. The site itself is approximately 16.3 acres. That's parcel 3, that is. And the proposal is to modify the PAD to allow for exclusively multifamily on parcel 3 of Park West. And I'll explain in a little bit kind of what that exactly means and what's being modified within the PAD to allow for exclusively multifamily on that parcel. As you can see here, tried to give a bit of context for the subject site, again, referring to parcel 3 of Park West. Immediately to the north, you have about a 330-foot power line easement, and there are power line corridors or poles that run within that easement. Immediately north of that, you have single-family residential. To the west of this site, as I referenced, is parcel 2 of Park West, which is an existing multifamily development within the larger Park West development. And then continuing on, you have the parcel 1, or the commercial portion of Park West. Immediately to the south of the subject site, really south and east, you have the Loop 101 freeway. On the other side of the freeway, a little bit off the screen to the east, is the Peoria Crossings commercial development, which contains anchors such as Target, Kohl's, other retailers. So here you can see a delineation of the different parcels a little bit easier. And this will give you an idea of what exactly is being proposed by this PAD amendment. So again, the PAD for Park West already exists. It already covers the subject site. However, there is a ratio identified within the PAD that identifies at least 30 to 60% of the overall development must be non-residential. So think of retail shops, think of restaurants, and in particular, it's very specific and identifies gross floor area of the total project. So as you can imagine, that starts to get really sticky when you're looking at multi-story buildings for the apartments and you're looking at 1 story for the commercial piece. Really, the intent of that was to make sure that there's not just non-residential or not just multifamily within Park West. We wanted to have a mixture of uses that would be able to feed each other well and build a synergy within the center. So with that in mind, what this amendment proposes is to remove that ratio as it applies to parcel 3. The reason being, you can see a little bit under the red area that there are undeveloped parcels within parcel 1 of Park West, meaning there are pad sites that at one day will likely develop with additional commercial uses, whether that's retail or restaurant or service establishments. With that in mind, the gross floor area ratio really ties the entire development to additional non-residential development. So even though more non-residential is contemplated within parcel 1, until that develops, it kind of puts a cap on the remaining development within Park West. Really, the spirit of that, again, was just to make sure that there was a healthy balance between the non-residential development and the multifamily or residential components. As a result, this would remove that and allow for multifamily on parcel 3, which then provides both parcel 2 and 3 as multifamily, leaving the remaining parcel 1 pieces for non-residential development. So here we have an image of the conceptual site plan. The site plan is currently under review by staff. obviously subject to Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation to council, and finally council action before staff can act on that site plan. The site plan will ultimately determine the finite details of the layout, configuration, and minor things like sidewalk connections. In this case, you have a good demonstration of what could develop based on the proposed PAD. So something to keep in mind is that power line corridor. As you can see at the north end of those buildings there, that's approximately where the power line easement begins. So ultimately, the applicant is not able to construct physical structures other than, say, parking and, in limited instances, landscaping within those areas. What they've tried to do in what would otherwise be really kind of a vacant, unused area is activate it by providing open space opportunities for the future residents. So really 45% of the site is under that power line easement. They're now able to activate it with something other than just a parking field or just vacant land. Here you can see an illustration of the proposed access points. So in the yellow arrow there, you'll see the vehicular access point for the development. That comes through parcel 2, or view at Park West Apartments. So those apartments are bisected by an access road that feeds from the commercial through parcel 2 and then onto the proposed layout of parcel 3. The green arrows that you see there are the main pedestrian connection points. So you would still have a pedestrian connection adjacent to the vehicular connection that you see there in yellow, but also you would have those pedestrian access points to continue on the trail on the north end of this development that ultimately connects to a trail that exists within parcel 2 and a trail that exists within parcel 1. So folks could take that trail from this parcel all the way over to the commercial piece and not have to interact with any vehicles or drive aisles or anything like that. Additionally, at the northeast corner of the site, you see another green arrow there. That's another pedestrian access point. Immediately north of that is the corner of 95th Avenue and Las Palmeritas. And at that corner is the elementary school. So this would provide easy access for any students within the development to continue on to the school that's immediately north instead of having to get in a car and drive completely around the subject development. What the applicant's proposing is 338 units, which equates to approximately 20.93 dwelling units per acre. As you'll see in a subsequent slide, this site is within the mixed-use Main Street land use designation, which ultimately calls for kind of, again, that mixture of uses that we were looking for with the contemplation of Park West. And when there are residential components to it, we do look for densities in excess of 20 dwelling units per acre. So this is just in excess of what we're looking for. Really, the target in there, I believe, is 30. So it fits within the range of that land use category. For the height of the development, there's been a couple of different formulations of proposals on parcel 3 within Park West. As a result, when it was entitled, it accounted for a development height of 110 feet in height. As you can imagine, that's pretty tall, at least by Peoria standards. What they're proposing here is approximately 54 feet, give or take based on the elevations. So about half of the allowable developable height for parcel 3. Here we have some information with respect to the open space and parking standards for the proposed development. They are looking to modify some of the development standards within the PAD, and you can see them illustrated here. So one of the key components within this development is open space. They are proposing to provide 275 square feet per bedroom of common usable open space, not segmented private open space, but open to all residents of the community. And that's measured not only within the areas that provide amenities such as pool and a dog park, but in addition to that, the trail that's on the north end. And really, it only accounts for a swath on either side of that trail. Not the entire SRP easement is counted as open space. It's just approximately 20 feet on either side of that trail is counted. The private open space, which you would commonly see in the form of balconies or patios, we have a prescriptive ratio within the design review manual. It identifies a minimum of 50 square feet for balcony units, so upper floor units, and 113 square feet for patio or ground floor units. What they're looking to do is modify that ratio, bring it up on the balcony units. As you can imagine, with a multi-story development, there are more balcony units than there are ground floor units. And they're looking to reduce that ratio for ground floor units. What that ultimately means is the total private open space increases by approximately 14%. As you can see here, they're also looking to make modifications to the parking standards. So the city currently has requirements dependent on the unit type and unit mix within a multifamily development. What the applicant is proposing here is an increase to 2 of those 4 ratios and a decrease in 1. So to give you an idea of the unit mix, there's about 30 studio units, 196 one-bedrooms, 104 two-bedrooms, and 8 three-bedrooms. So that you don't have to do the math, the delta between those is about 33 parking spaces. So what you can see here is an illustration of the land use category for Park West. As you can see, the entire site is contemplated as mixed-use Main Street. So the idea being you have those mixture of uses and that walkability and connectivity between the components so that it doesn't feel like a segmented development. You have the opportunity to go from one piece to another, especially for residents within the development. They have the capability to walk to goods and services, or in this case, several restaurants. This does not change the zoning. The current zoning for Park West is PAD. Again, this is just an amendment to that existing PAD. As with any rezoning case, we do require that a neighborhood meeting be held. In this case, the neighborhood meeting was held on July 13th. There's approximately 4 individuals in attendance at that meeting. Questions and comments from the public focused on items such as access, number of units, amenities, building height, security, and maintenance of the buildings over time. Notification was provided in accordance with the City of Peoria zoning ordinance. So a postcard was sent out to all property owners within 600 feet, all HOAs within 1 mile, and a legal ad was posted in the paper in addition to signs being posted on the subject parcel as well as within parcel 1 to indicate to folks really where the subject site is since it's not on the main road. As a result, staff finds that the request is in conformance with the City of Peoria general plan. It provides development standards that are in context with the adjacent development and would provide residents businesses within the existing commercial portions of Park West, additional residents that would be able to utilize those goods and services. As a result, staff recommends approval of case Z0419A.10 to the City Council, subject to the attached conditions of approval within Exhibit 1. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Cody, appreciate it. Do we have any questions or comments from any commissioners? Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of quick questions. Can you speak to the emergency access for this property? This seems to be kind of a wonky spot. And it would seem that getting fire trucks, police personnel in there in a hurry and out could be tricky, but I may just be not reading the map correctly. Maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. Chairman, Commissioner Nelson. Just going back a couple slides here, illustrating the pedestrian access. In addition to the pedestrian access that's provided to the north there, that area is in fact wide enough to provide emergency fire service. So that would serve as their secondary requirement. Fire does have a requirement for half the diagonal distance. So in this case, having that one entry point for vehicles would not suffice. So this piece that would allow for emergency vehicles, but not your typical citizen driving their car, would allow for not only the pedestrian access, but also fire access.
Thank you. May I ask a follow-up question, Chairman? Sure. The parking lot that's within the buffer zone there, I would assume that has to be pretty well lit for security reasons. Do we anticipate any issues with light leaking into the neighboring properties to the north? Or how are we dealing with that?
Sure. Chairman, Commissioner Nelson, so as a part of the site plan review, that is one of the things that we look at is light trespass into adjacent properties, and in particular residential properties, single-family residential. So we do look at a photometric plan which provides lighting values, and we ensure that there is no lighting. Basically, it's a 0-foot candle measurement at or before the property line. So making sure that no light is in fact spilling over into those single-family homes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair, and Mr. Gleason, great presentation. Just a few questions. First, help me understand, so parcel 3 currently has a 30 to 60% commercial restriction or build recommendation of commercial build on it today. And the recommendation is to remove that so we can do multifamily. Is that correct?
So Chairman, Commissioner Schaefer, just a slight caveat to that statement. It's a 30 to 60% ratio for all of Park West. So parcels 1, 2, and 3, not just associated with parcel 3. What the proposal is to remove that ratio applying to parcel 3, so that they wouldn't then have to wait for additional commercial within parcel 1 to develop.
Mr. Chair, can I follow up question?
Sure,
Thank you, Mr. Gleason. What is the ratio today with parcel 1 commercial current development for all of Park West? Do we know that?
Chairman, Commissioner Schaefer, I do not know the exact number. I know that quite a long time ago we performed a lengthy math exercise to figure that out. And ultimately, the determination was that to ensure that this parcel could develop and still allow for the remaining pad sites within parcel 1 to develop, that the ratio would need to be removed for this site.
Wonderful, thank you. And then, Mr. Chair, one more? Is that? Thank you. One more question, Mr. Gleason. I see in Exhibit 7, it has parcel 1 and 2, a max building height of 80 feet. And then parcel 3, it has a max height of 110 feet with additional 18 feet for to allow for mechanical screening. So that's great that in your presentation it said that their max height would be, I believe, 54 feet?
Chairman, Commissioner Schaefer, approximately 54 feet is what they're showing on the elevations today. They are not looking to modify the height standard.
Okay. And then one additional question. Do we know the max height of parcel 1 and 2? Does it exceed 54 feet?
Chairman, Commissioner Schaefer, the maximum building height for parcel 1 is 80 feet, and that's the same for parcel 2 as well.
Correct, that's the max. What's the current height? Do we know?
I do not know that. The applicant is present. They may have more information on that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gleason. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Fighter?
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner Schaefer just asked the same question on the height of parcel 2. If anybody has that information, that would be helpful. What's the density of parcel 2? Is it consistent with what we're proposing here for parcel 3 in terms of density in units?
Chairman, Commissioner Fighter, just in regards to your first part, I can refer to the height of parcel 3. And there is an individual here today that is associated with parcel 3. I'm not sure if he would have additional information on the specific building height, but it is a 3-story apartment building.
Basically the same as what? Because we're proposing 3 stories on, or 4 stories on?
Chairman, Commissioner Fighter, it's 2 and 4 stories.
2 and 4 stories, okay, all right. The question on the 2 access points, are those, because it's a unique access, it's a challenging site in terms of access, but I assume the 2 vehicular access points, are those through existing easements over parcel 2?
So, Chairman, Commissioner Fighter, the applicant would probably better be able to address that. I believe there is an existing easement where you see the yellow arrow indicated. There was contemplation at one point, you can probably see a little bit north, kind of halfway in between the green and yellow arrows, additional paved surface. In further discussions as we're reviewing the site plan and in coordination with our traffic department, there was concern about the ability to provide a sufficient turnaround should someone get to the gate. So we're still evaluating that, but we do not anticipate that access point to go forward.
Okay. I have one more, if that's okay. If you did the math for us, so it looks like based upon the standard, there's going to be 33 less stalls. Is there an opportunity to pick up additional parking for them in the SRP easement area in terms of coverage that could help alleviate that? If, I'm not saying they need it, but if they needed it.
Chairman, Commissioner Fighter, I would probably defer that one to the applicant. I know that there are certain restrictions as far as how much area they could account for within that easement and what they could place in there.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if there's the ability to add additional spaces within that area.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioners. I'd like to also recognize Commissioner Grice has joined us. Any other questions or comments from any commissioners? I have a question. I suspect it'll probably be best addressed by the applicant, and I'll just state the question right now. Do they have, or are they working with SRP on an encroachment agreement, and are they within development standards of developing underneath those power lines? We have seen no further questions or comments from the commission. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak?
Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Taylor Earl with Earl and Curley. Our address is 3101 North Central Avenue. Probably makes sense. Why don't I just answer some of the questions that came up, and then I'll go through my slides. So yes, on the SRP, we are working closely with SRP and have had lots of communication with them. So we have been working on this project for about a year, and so there's been quite a bit of communication. And we have our engineer here if you wanted to get into more level of detail. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you about that. But yes, the answer is yes, we're closely working with SRP. One thing on the parking that I just wanted to clarify, you noticed in the parking table that was shown that it looked like there was one red on there and a slight deviation downward. Actually, that's already permitted in the PAD today. The PAD it requires 1.5, and we're at 1.64. And so we're actually going up. We have more parking than would otherwise be required, because you saw out in that table that there was one that went up and then there was one that went down. The one that showed going down is already pre-existing. That's not a request that we're making in this version, but it is a deviation from city standards. The table is correct, but the PAD already allows for that deviation. On parcel 3, it is 3 stories. It's possible, as Mr. Gleason mentioned, there's a representative here from those apartments could maybe speak to the height. We would sort of guess that it's could be in that 35, 36 foot range, 30 to 40. We don't know for certain. And then Harkins, we believe to be 50 feet. So as the question of what would be the height within parcel 1. Okay, I think that addresses the things that were the questions. So let's go ahead and go to, all right, you're my next person here. So one of the real thrust that we want to focus on tonight, because obviously Mr. Gleason's give a lot of great detail here, and so we want to sort of provide some insight from a different perspective as well, which is the strengthening of Park West. About a year ago, our firm was involved in a rezoning case just west of 99th Avenue, just on the other side of 99th Avenue, with a multifamily project, which this commission approved and was ultimately approved by council and is now under construction. And that was really my first foray into fully understanding Park West, understanding the challenges that it's gone through in the past, where it's at today, and how we can strengthen it moving forward. And at that time, we were purchasing it from some other entity, but we had the support of the Park West owners, and not surprisingly, you would expect. And we saw the opportunity for bringing additional people to Park West. And any mixed-use development, any commercial development needs people. They are the lifeblood of those establishments. You can have great appendages and great arms and legs, but if the blood doesn't flow, they don't work. And we've seen that happen. In fact, this photograph here is a little bit of an example of that. That Spur Cafe, that lone Spur Cafe, that doesn't exist anymore. It's not there. And we've seen that happen at Park West, unfortunately, in the 13 years that it's been open, is we've seen things come and we've seen things go. We've seen vacancy rates that aren't where we want them, right? Now, we've seen a recent kind of turn in that, and I actually asked the owners, how much of that was attributable to the bringing of, even the mention that additional density was coming. He said, look, I can't tell you exactly all the reasons people come, but I think it's a significant factor that even as you tell a lessee, hey, these are the projects that this one's going through entitlements, this one has already been entitled, that's very attractive. And in your packet today, you have a support letter, about 15 support letters that are coming from the businesses within Park West that are saying, we want this project to come. We need this here. And I believe one of them had discussed, well, I'll show you the language, but felt like in the 10 plus years they had been in Park West, had never seen Park West reach its full potential. And I think that's right. It hasn't reached that full potential. What it needs is additional people to support what is already being invested in that area. Let's go to the next slide, Lori. And it's funny that particular Lone Spur Cafe even received the mayor's award. So this wasn't some run of the run-of-the-mill type establishment or one that was poorly run. It was a good establishment and even had struggles. Next slide. All right, so let's go through a little bit of the history of Park West. So opened in 2008. The accounts are through the media that I've read that it did struggle. Now, of course, coming out of the recession, some of that could have been attributable, but it had struggled for many years. Next one. So the owners for that filed in bankruptcy in 2009. Ultimately, it was purchased by the Howard Hughes Company, and then ultimately sold to the current owner, Sire Equities, in 2017. Next bullet. So Sire performed makeovers. The reports that I read were upwards of $4 million. I didn't ask them how much to tell me exactly how much, but that was what was reported would be going into the center in order to really give it a facelift and to help the vitality of Park West moving forward. And I think we can see that it's been well done. So at the time, Sire had reported that their vision was to make Park West the Kierland Commons of the West Valley, to make it a premium place to be. You can fill commercial tenancy. You can do it with cell phone stores and other establishments like that. That's not what Park West is. It's not what we want Park West to be. We not only want Park West to be open and places to be filled, but be filled with quality tenants, quality restaurants, places that you're proud to say, Park West is in Peoria. We have one of the crown jewels of the West Valley, and we're attracting people to this establishment. But you need not only people from outside, you need people inside as well. And that's what that says. All right. So as was stated, parcel 3 is a challenging parcel. This has been on the market for those 13 years. And there were opportunities for other types of users to come in here. One of the challenges is that, look at it from a retail perspective. You have parcel 2, which is, because of the density of commercial development, right, the concentration of retail development on parcel 1, you are effectively sort of severing off parcel 3 from that main walkable area, right? It becomes somewhat of an orphaned parcel. And so there's a challenge there for sort of saying, well, we'll do retail here, and then you'll walk a little way, and then we'll have some shops over here. That's a recipe for those shops not doing well. And again, the market is one of the best arbiters of what works. The market is efficient, and that has not developed for many, many years. And as Mr. Gleason mentioned, today's request is not about adding a use to parcel 3. It is simply about reversing the timing so that we are allowing it to go forward, because the percentages would say, well, we'll wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait until we get more within parcel 1 that'll develop, and then we will allow something like that to go forward. And the problem is that we're sitting and we're waiting, and we need people. And so it makes much more sense to allow those people to come. Those people will help to spur development within parcel 1, help to fill up the rest of the pads, concentrate, and continue to make that a very viable corridor. The other challenge is that it's a circuitous access, and I think that was mentioned earlier. And so you have office users who are going to have to wind through, and there's much better office parcels that are not developed all along the 101. Same thing for, hotel had been discussed. Well, hotels want to be, down at Westgate. They want to be at Arrowhead. And this is not, they don't want to be able to, you want to be able to have quick access for their customers. So when we had CBRE, one of the biggest brokerage companies in the world, look at this, they identified those challenges. And I think it's very telling that we not only have the support of Park West, they're the ones selling the parcel to Trammell Residential, who we represent. They are saying this is what we see. All right, they have come in and have put investment in and are looking for it to continue to move this forward, and to have such support from the businesses that have invested in Park West. This is somewhat of a payoff for them to come in, to invest their time and energy and come into Park West. We're allowing them to now have people in order to hundreds of new potential customers. Next slide. So this is that core, right? This is that core of those businesses that we know and love and have been excited about seeing new tenants come online. So as Mr. Gleason mentioned, we are within the mixed-use Main Street, and again, click one more here. The residential density should be in excess of 12 to 20 units per acre. We're proposing at 20.93. So we are consistent with the general plan. If we were to lose density, if we were to lose height, we would likely fall below what it is that the voters through the general plan have wanted to see on this parcel. So we're right in line with what was envisioned for this parcel. And by bringing those people in, you're activating this, you're providing it the mixed-use environment, you're providing walkability, you're only enhancing what is there. It is squarely within the vision that the city had when it switched over to this general plan designation, which really wasn't that many years ago, just recently. All right, and so you see how we fit in, right? We fit in very nicely into that. I think I can speak somewhat unbiasedly because I didn't design it, but I think our design team did a fabulous job of making this work. The fact that we had such minor deviations in order to make this all work on that parcel, because not only is it the shape, something that zoning lawyers love when it comes to a zoning variance case. We love shapes like that because they allow us to say there's a special circumstance here. But on top of that, you also have the SRP easement, which we can't develop buildings into, which is another thing that we would, we point to for special circumstances, right? And so the challenge, you look for the parking, for example, is sure, we can put parking up there, but what we really want to do is have as much parking as we can down by the units so they're nice and convenient and close. And so that's why there's minor deviations for the parking that we have within that particular zone. But they're really relatively minor, and we can certainly go into that, but I think Mr. Gleason did a good job. And so I mentioned this earlier, so we don't spend time on that. Go ahead. All right, so I'll walk you through a little bit of design. As again, we have our design team here if you'd like more specifics on what we're doing. I would just note, as Mr. Gleason said, we are still going through the site planning process. So a lot of the details, still are yet to be finalized. We are close. We are getting very, very close to getting that. But the zoning is a use question. But I still wanted to show you all the progress that we've made in the building. That again is we're just a couple of little things that we're tweaking. We expect to be able to submit for building permits very soon. But we haven't buttoned it completely, but we would expect to do so very, very soon. This is one of the amenity areas, and I'll pull an aerial so you can see kind of where this fits into the project. But what we wanted to do is to have, rather than have a couple of different pools, to have one very high-quality pool with a cabana there in the back. There's a section, you can see how it has some good architectural interest, but there's a sort of a section that's more straight there on the right side of the slide. That would be allowed for lap swimming is the idea. So there's a portion that's sort of straight, and then there's some architectural interest on the outside. And so we see this as sort of a resort style pool. You have the buildings that shape around it. That's going to provide a much quieter environment as well, because we'll have sound buffering from the freeway. And so it'll be a nice cove and people being able to be out on their patios. So it's a really nice environment. All right, so this perspective would be if you were sort of freeway side. Obviously, you're a little bit elevated here in terms of the perspective looking down, because we wanted to be able to show you what's behind. The buildings that you're seeing sort of in the front, those are carriage units. Those would be garage units with residential above. That's why in the staff report you saw say 2 and 4 stories, because those are going to be things that you'll see on the outside of the project, but the core is at the 4 stories. You can see just the massive distance that we have to residential, which would be to the north or on the right side of the screen. I think it's approximately 350 feet, give or take. So it's more than a football field, might be 360. We have a dog park there that you can see kind of right there in the middle. Also, there's kind of a neat feature. It's a little hard to see, but you can see just above the dog park, you see a couple of food trucks. We have a pull-out area where there's an opportunity for food trucks to come in and park in the designated areas. On occasion, special occasions, we notify the tenants, so it's kind of a cool feature. Next slide. All right, so we'll walk you through, kind of give you the top-down view of kind of everything together, and then we'll sort of zoom in on each section, just so you can get a sense of where those things are located. Go ahead. So the first one here is that courtyard that I mentioned. So this would be an area where we might have, gaming. It can be sort of multi-purpose. In other words, it can be used with just the open area. We would have games where people could come out, do yard games. So this is separated from the pool, but a very active amenity area, but also can be in sort of a more passive state. So you're not fixed into the amenities, but rather they're modular. Okay, and then this is where that dog park is located, just so you can get a sense of the perspective of where we're at. And you can see on that south, sort of east property line, that's where those carriage units are located. And then the pool area is, again, on the west side of the site, kind of surrounded by the buildings. And then this is that main entry feature. So it's got a really beautiful entry right as you come into the project. Great articulation in the building, in my opinion. Good coloring, good movement. And so that's something that we worked closely with staff on for the past, again, many months to sort of work on that articulation and that design element. And then one of the features that we have throughout that, so what we've done is there is an existing trail easement along the north side of that SRP area, and it's an easement that's public, and it runs all the way to 99th Avenue. It runs across our parcel, runs across parcel 2, and then parcel 1. But what we did is we sort of doubled down on using that area. And so we put in a walking trail, sort of exercise path, that gives people a chance to sort of get away from the multifamily, the structures themselves, and be able to kind of go around that area, utilize that walking path that's already there to the north, and do different exercises. All right, go ahead. All right. So in terms of the open space, as you saw, that we are increasing the common open space. We really wanted this project to be just a tremendous, top-tier type project. And so there's a list of all the different amenities that you can kind of see as it goes around and identifies them. But we have both passive and active spaces, the pool, spa, covered outdoor areas. We have a fire table with accent wall, outdoor kitchen, restrooms, outdoor barbecue, sensory garden, work nodes, outdoor fitness, succulent garden. So we're just packed with all sorts of premium amenity package. All right, and this kind of goes through a little bit. Again, we can go through these, but I think we sort of walked through them one piece by piece. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of support letters that came in. We were grateful to have these. Frankly, we probably can get additional ones. It was sort of done quickly, and we sort of sent out a request for people who wanted to express their support. I think it was sent out this morning. We were able to get this much support, and actually since these came in, I've gotten additional support, and I want to make sure that they're named and thank them for their support. Salon Plaza, which identified that it also represented the 30-plus business owners that are within Salon Plaza, those who maybe lease chairs. They're also in support. Wildflower, Boss Barbershop, Bully Brew Company, Cold Beers and Cheeseburgers, and Candle Chemistry. And so we're grateful. I would just read, I don't know if you had a chance to, we can go to the next slide. My name is Chase Harlan. I'm the operating partner of Fleming's Prime Steakhouse and Wine Bar located within Park West. We moved into Park West in 2008. We have learned about the proposed new multifamily project that is being proposed for the vacant parcel next to the freeway. We are in support of this proposal, and we urge the Planning Commission City Council to approve this project. As a business, what we need the most is people to frequent our establishment. This multifamily project would add 338 units to Park West, which translates into hundreds of new potential customers to support the businesses within Park West. A strong and healthy Park West is good for Peoria, the surrounding community, and all the owners and tenants within Park West. This project would help us obtain and achieve that type of health and vitality for Park West. We urge approval of this proposed project. And go to the next one. And just something, I sort of alluded to this. This is from Rolling Rack Boutique, going to the bottom. This project would help us obtain and achieve that type of health and vitality. We urge approval. I've personally been involved with retailers in Park West since it was built 10 plus years ago, and I've never been able to see this great shopping area live up to its potential. I would really like this area, along with the company I work, succeed here. So again, we believe that this is a tremendous win, not only for Park West, but it's a tremendous win for the community. It provides the type of density that these types of projects need to be successful. There's been a lot of details that have been worked out with staff through many, many months to get us to this point. We're grateful for your consideration. I really believe that this is a project that is going to be significant, not only, again, for the health of Park West, but I think it's significant for Peoria.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate it. Do we have any comments from any commissioners? Commissioner Hutchinson.
Thanks, Chair. What is the generally what's the breakup of the apartments, and like what sizes, how many bedrooms? You have a kind of a...
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we have a studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. I'll just rattle them off and you can ask me to go back. Studio, 555 square feet, 1 bedroom, 788, 2 bedroom, 1,181, 3 bedroom, 1,462.
Okay, and if I may, just to follow up to that, so is it designed for young families, would you say, or is it more like the young single professional type client? I mean, any idea of the makeup of the...
I don't. Perhaps a client here from Trammell Crow can talk about a little bit of the market. I mean, I think you do have to look at the location within Park West. I think that is significant. Its location along the freeway. I think all buyers can be attracted to living near a freeway, but those who are getting to go to work probably put a little bit more of a premium. Those who want to come in and spend money and want to be able to walk, they would probably elect here, probably chart that a little higher in their list of importances. So while we can't to say that, oh, there wouldn't be a family that might come here, or there wouldn't be this, I think that this location within Park West and its location along in their employment corridors would speak to attracting that type of tenant, probably here. That would be my take.
I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Fider.
Can you dumb it down for me, where you explain that this is more of a timing issue. If I understand it correctly, that had Park West been fully built out, which there's still available pads to be built out, we wouldn't be having an issue here, or?
Yeah, fundamentally, that is correct. Now, exactly how the exact math breaks up, whether or not we would have the exact same square footage, depending on exactly how that square footage breaks up, that I couldn't tell you for certain. But generally speaking, that is accurate, that the collection, if you will, almost of the commercial space in a bank sort of yields the allowance for multifamily, right? And so what we're doing is actually reversing the order, where we're allowing multifamily to come in advance of that commercial. And as Mr. Gleason said, I think what's critical is that it was a little bit of a wonky mathematics. I think the intent out of the gate was we want to have a mix. We want to have a mix of uses here. And I think that is certainly being achieved with the proposal that we have.
But again, so had the retail been fully built out, you would have the rights to do the density that you guys are looking to accomplish, correct?
Again, exactly, I just want to be careful. I want to say the answer is essentially
Generally, yes.
Yeah, but exactly how the
Conceptually.
numbers are, because it yields a certain square footage, and just want to be careful about that. But otherwise, yeah, that's the
Okay.
concept.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair. Sir, great presentation. I know Mr. Gleason didn't have this information, but when we're talking about the percentage of commercial development for all of Park West, parcel 1, 2, and 3, do you have that percentage as it stands today with the development? Because I know Commissioner Fider was talking about, a timeline of commercial development, but do we know what it is today with parcel 1?
I don't know exactly what it is, and Ms. Deaver can maybe correct me, because I know that I believe she was involved with some of those mathematics early on when we sort of had this initial conversation with staff. It was sort of my understanding that we were at a point where we could probably have some small degree of multifamily. I can't remember, 20 units, or it was some small, we had basically met that threshold, so that really adding any more would have been some sort of nominal number. We were sort of at that threshold, that was my sort of understanding, and again, Ms. Deaver may correct me on that.
And that's what I'm trying to get to. Are we splitting hairs over 2 or 3%, or are we 30% away, in theory?
Yeah, no, I believe it was at the point where the project wouldn't have penciled at all. It wasn't close, right? It wasn't, you could have gotten 300 units, but you went to 3. No, it was something like very nominal. Essentially, we were at the cap, and you could have maybe done 20 or 10 or 5. Or it was some nominal figure that I think we looked at, and the reason we don't, and this is my guess, that we don't know the numbers because people looked at it and, okay, we got to, either it happens or it doesn't. Either we change it, we reverse it, or this just doesn't go forward. Not a matter of, well, let's figure out what density could work, and maybe if you guys shave this off. It wasn't even close. Is that responsive?
That's
More
responsive.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question on the vegetative buffer on the north side between the property and the homes. The staff report said 60% of all trees shall be 24-inch box or greater. Do you envision the majority of those will be along that vegetative border? We're not going to have 1 in 5 gallon trees on that northern border, are we?
Yeah, so I probably would need Kimley Horn to speak a little bit, because they've had the conversations with SRP. It's going to be largely SRP controlled. Whether or not they will allow trees or where they'll allow trees is a big kind of part of that. Same thing with the lighting. There's obviously a lot of, SRP has every right to be very protective of what occurs within that easement. It's a very important easement for them, and so we're sort of guests there and have to abide by what they. So we're sort of willing. We're talking to staff and SRP, but SRP is our staff is also saying, well, SRP kind of needs to call a lot of the shots within that easement area. So that's the best probably response I can give, unless where do you go? Anything else to add to that?
We're working with them, and we'll get as many trees and plants as we can in that area.
Yeah, so for the record on the microphone, essentially we're working with them, and we'll kind of get as much as we can in there. Yeah, that had been our intent, to try to put them up against, the residential. Again, we just have to yield to what they say.
I got you. If I may ask a follow-up question. One of the concerns I've had with developments, particularly multifamily, is affordability. When I hear terms like gated, resort-style pool, gated community, top-tier project, as I'm listening to your project, I'm hearing dollar signs, and I'm hearing, boy, this would be really tough for a young family or, a single person trying to strike out on their own, perhaps afford this. So maybe you can help me understand, again, I'm making some assumptions. So can you speak to any of the price points for rent for these units?
Yeah, I can tell you what, and I just want to put the caveat that I have to put in every time I'm asked that we're not going to market today and all that stuff. Okay, as long as we all know those caveats. But we think the average rent would probably be $1,125 for a studio, $1,531 one bedroom, $2,035 two bedroom, and $2,300 for a three bedroom. So I would also say that there are going to be different locations where different products make sense. I can tell you that, I'm doing a project right now in Phoenix, and it's coming in at a good workforce, solid workforce project, right? And that's because that's what that location really needs. That's what the buyer probably would want in that location. Having a project like this probably wouldn't make sense. It would probably price out that market. But I think once you come into an establishment like Park West, there's a certain level of amenity that's already built in and allows you to do a product that maybe in other areas maybe not make as much sense. And one of the directions that we had gotten from earlier as we kind of met with city officials was that, I should say just one in particular, had said, let's make this nice. And I think that spoke a little bit to, and that particular comment then led to the idea of people who could work from home, who could have daytime spendability on some of the shops, thinking that, some of those higher income earners might have more flexibility to work from home, which might translate into more daytime dollars being spent.
I understand. Okay. Well, thank you.
Commissioner Schaefer, did you have another comment?
Yes, sorry, just a follow-up question from Commissioner Nelson's question. How do your projected rates compare to Parcel 2's rates? Do you know what those rates are?
I do not know what those are.
Thank you. And just as a way of information, a couple of comments I have. Anticipating future issues when we start getting to site plan. Normally, we would love to see big giant trees in between the apartment buildings and the residential community. Glad we brought up the SRP conversation. Federal standards regulate what can go underneath power lines. Big trees are a big no-no. And generally speaking, those supersede zoning guidelines. So I anticipate those are it's going to be a hang-up at some point. I think city staff is well aware of those things, but for the information of the commission here, that normally we would want to see those giant trees, but that's going to be limited in what your capacity is to put underneath the power lines. And obviously, I'm always biased to protect the power line corridors. So
Chairman,
thank you for.
If I may just add one
Sure.
thing, I think it does speak to that too, and you're absolutely right. First thing, zoning attorneys look at is what's next to it, what's already there, what are the views, because we know these are the concerns. The distance between that easement, while it sort of giveth and it taketh away, right? It maybe taketh away in terms of what we can do in terms of tree buffers, but it giveth in terms of we have to have a very far distance between us and the residential to the north. So there's quite a bit of distance. You wouldn't otherwise see a property owner able to give up 300 plus feet as a nicety buffer to a residential. You're just not going to see that. But here, the easement sort of forces that issue, so while it reduces the trees, it increases the space.
Correct. Forces a larger buffer than there otherwise would have been. Any other questions or comments from the commission? If not, thank you.
All right, thank you.
We do have a request to speak from Mr. Timothy Lasota. Would you like to approach? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm Timothy Lasota, 2198 East Camelback Road in Phoenix, and I'm here on behalf of Bellevue LLC in opposition to this proposal. Bellevue LLC is indeed parcel 2 that we've been talking about, and the issue we have with this proposal is the density of it. And I just want to take you a little bit back through this process. Originally, and some of the members of the commission have already noted that the access to this parcel is a challenge. And to have so many units on this one parcel, somebody asked how many we had. We have 260 units. And obviously this one entrance goes through our sort of main drag, so to speak. Well, staff apparently originally recognized that that was an issue, and staff initially required a second point of ingress and egress. In fact, it would be in your packet. And that's the one at the northeast. You can kind of see it poking out there. It's on the northwest side. And that was going to be kind of the reliever exit, because I think the reason staff required the second one was there's just too much traffic going through the middle of the other complex, and there should be two entrance points and exit points. Well, we said, wait a second, there's no easement there now, and that's our dog park. So, we don't think that's a great solution either. Well, the response seems to be, well, let's just forget about that. We thought they needed two entrance and exit points, and now we'll do something else, which basically means that it's completely foisted on us again. Everything's funneled through the one entrance and exit. I mean, I think staff should have stuck with their initial requirement that there be two, that look, if you're going to have this many units, you need to have two entrance and exit points. And as it is, because we've sort of been penalized for saying, well, wait a second, why should we have to give up our dog park to accommodate your density? Answer is we shouldn't. So now it's back to what it was. And I think that demonstrates exactly why this is too dense. It's because it's so dense that staff says, well, you need two entrances and exits. Well, when that's not feasible, we just eliminate one. And that doesn't make any sense either. So the big problem, obviously, is there's just too many units on this piece of property, and we're the ones who are being made to pay for that. Now, I do recognize, obviously, I think everybody would like to see something nice go here, something nice and affordable, but it doesn't mean that whatever, and we want to see these businesses succeed also. It's an amenity for us, and we recognize some of them have supported this project, but if you told most businesses, oh, let's just put 1,000 units there, they'd probably say, great, the more people, the merrier for them, but that cannot be the only consideration for this body. It should be, is this a truly workable project? You'll notice we never really got an answer to what they could do currently. I think the answer was they couldn't do much, but what they could do if parcel one was completely built out. I think it is a significant, we actually don't have those numbers, but I think it is a significant increase over what that would support. So I think at a minimum, we didn't answer that question. We're talking about doubling, we're talking about a 10% increase, we're talking about a 30% increase. We don't know. And we should know that before we approve this. Initially, this was supposed to be slated for a, it was a targeted industry, and this, we had this ratio, and it just seems like we keep getting further away from what the initial plan was, and now they want more density. Well, if it works, then that's one thing, but it obviously doesn't work because the one entrance and one exit will not support it. And we know that because staff required that at the beginning. I did confirm that with staff. It was not just something that the applicant put on there because it was convenient. Staff said we need this second entrance and exit. And now all of a sudden it's gone because we said, well, wait a second, that's our dog park. Why should we have to give that up? So last thing I'll note is that I think the general plan says 12 to 20 units. So, I think there's a lot of things a lot of considerations, but, it could be far less dense and still meet that 12 units per acre threshold. So I think that's the big issue. I think they just need fewer units on this, and because the negative externalities are simply going to be borne by us on parcel 2. We've already built. Who wouldn't like a little bit more density? But, we built, and now we're sort of, everything's going to be going right down our main street, and I don't think that was anything that was ever envisioned. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Hutchinson?
Thanks, Chair. So I'm looking at the map of the existing property right now, from Google Maps. Where exactly is this dog park that we're giving up?
The dog park, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Hutchinson, the dog park is essentially on the northeast side of our parcel. But wherever their second entrance and egress point, which you can see it on the one site plan, and actually what it said is, residential access subject to securing easement. which they didn't have, but it was right there. I mean, literally, it was, this second access point went right through our dog park. So it would be up around the north, well, on the north side of the property, on the north, excuse me, on the north side of the northernmost building on property 2.
Okay, and that, you would expect that to be, I'm not sure I'm seeing like, so, obviously development was coming here in some form, whether, you know, commercial, residential, something's going there. What would you anticipate the access to be, knowing that you're developing on a parcel in between two major parcels of the overall project? Where would you expect the access to? I mean, I'm not seeing, you know, where your alternative, your suggested alternative would be to access, you know, an appropriate project on parcel 3. I'm not seeing that.
Well, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Hutchinson, the bottom line, and I don't know where they would put the second easement, the second access point, but the point of the matter is they're putting so many units on this property that staff says you got to have 2 entrances and exits. And I think, frankly, I think that's the applicant's issue to deal with is how do we do that? And I think when they can't do it or they decide they don't want to try, I think simply saying, oh, well, now because they've said they don't want to do it because somebody said it's going to be, you know, our ox is going to be gored, now all of a sudden it's we don't need it and let's keep this at an extremely high density unit. Now clearly, Commissioner Hutchinson, you know, they do have the easement and we don't begrudge them using that one easement at all. But I think in terms of what was envisioned, it wasn't envisioned that we were going to have 338 dwelling units here. And they don't, well, it never was because that was never the plan. We talked about this mixed use. They were supposed to find a targeted industry. They had a development agreement. They didn't. I understand things change. And, you know, we're not telling them they shouldn't be able to build anything here. We're telling them, look, if they need 2 access points, then they should either provide it or they should scale it back to what 1 access point will support.
Commissioner Fighter.
Thank you. Do you have a sense of what density this would need to be to support the one entry point? I mean, what's your view or threshold of what the density should be?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Fighter, I don't have a specific, I think that's probably a question for staff because apparently their traffic division analyzed this and said based on your number of units. You know, I think more in the range of what's on parcel 2 seems a little bit more realistic for the land they're developing. But I think I think that I agree with staff's initial conclusion that it's too many now, and you know maybe 260 might be a little bit more a better type of goal. But I think staff would have to answer that question because they're the ones who concluded that based on their traffic analysis.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, since the question is directed, let me clarify a couple of items that have come up. With regard to access points, the primary access, as you see, is noted in the central location. They have emergency access in that northeast corner. That suffices for secondary access. So the 2 access points, as indicated, is appropriate for the dwelling units contemplated. That has been both reviewed by traffic and by the fire department with regards to necessary access. In response or in question to the other vehicular access point that is in that northeast corner of parcel 2, that was a recommended suggestion both by traffic staff and by planning staff to explore that as an opportunity. It is not a requirement. One of the challenges noted at that location is to make the turning radiuses appropriate to fit both what traffic needs for geometry, what we need from an engineering standpoint. We also want to be cognizant of the existing development as is. So the direction from staff at that location was to explore the possibility for more of resident convenience more than a required access point. We were looking at it from that standpoint. It's not a required access point. In regards to the density, people have asked in terms of parcel 1. The reason for the request this evening in terms of the amount of square footage, it's a projected square footage on parcel 1, and it's always been that way. And so that sliding scale presents a huge significant problem for staff based on projections, because those change over time. So while we think we have a projected number which may yield a density that could be allowed within parcel 3, we don't know, because the ultimate condition of parcel 1 can change. It can increase in the amount of square footage that can be commercial. Therefore, the number of units in parcel 3 could increase or decrease in that regard. So what I believe staff is trying to communicate, rather than continue the kind of crazy analysis, if you will, we're taking the equation out of the play, and we're talking a number of units and taking that ratio off of parcel 3 just for convenience of staff's sake. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Any other questions or comments from Commissioner Schaefer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Deaver, for breaking that down for us. So I have one follow-up question based upon your presentation or your comments. My understanding that the review tonight is just to amend the existing Park West planned area in regards to removing that 30 to 60% requirement. And when we start talking about access points and density, and there's still some open items. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that would go through the design review process with staff. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Schaefer, can you clarify your question for me a bit?
Well, I hear a few questions that are still open tonight. In talking about density and concern about access and stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would go through the design review process. Really what the commission's reviewing tonight and voting on tonight is amending to remove that 30 to 60% requirement. Is that correct, Ms. Deaver?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Schaefer, that is primarily the question before commission, exactly the land use question of taking that 30 to 60% ratio off the PAD. With regard to access, when we look at a PAD change, as Cody noted, the site plan is under review. What we are seeing right now is being projected. We have sufficient access for a development of this size at this location. Exact geometry and everything else will need to be settled as part of the design review process. But yes, the primary focus this evening is removing that 30 to 60% off the parcel.
Thank you for clarifying.
Mr. Chairman, can I have 30 seconds? Because she covered one of the questions I talked about.
You got 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an email from staff. It says it was a requirement from the traffic division. So, and it's only after we started complaining that it was going through our dog park that it didn't become a requirement. That's what staff told me. It was a requirement that because of the density that they had to have it. And all of a sudden it disappears when we say, you know what, you're going right through our dog park. And you are entitling this for 338 units. You are taking the 30 to 60%, but please don't leave here and think, well, if it's too many units, design review can take care of that. They can't. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I might just address that. The email that Mr. Lasota is referencing is from me. And it was a result of comments that we did provide to the applicant. So we did identify that we wanted to see a secondary access point. It was not based on the number of units. It was based on convenience. As a result of further review through items such as the lack of an easement for that area, the dog park that was constructed within that area, we evaluated that it probably wasn't the best fit in order to destroy an amenity for one community to provide convenient access for another.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to address the commission again?
Thank you. Okay, so let me try to kind of sort through some of the issues here. I guess first I think staff has really clarified the issue of that northwest corner, I think pretty well. I'm happy to address it, but the notion that, well, it was once required, therefore must be the assumption that's being filled in there is it must have been a requirement for that type of density. If that were the case, staff would not have said, you know what, you don't necessarily have to do that there, right? As they've clarified, it was a convenience thing. You know, we have satisfied fire by going to the northeast, so it wasn't a requirement. I'll also just note the reason, you know, we thought that it potentially could work is within the CC&R documents that we have with parcel 2, parcel 1, and parcel 3, it does grant our parcel the option of having an access easement through the north part of right above the buildings in parcel 2. After that was executed, a few years later, parcel 2 decided to build a dog park within that area. Now, it's not within an easement, it's within a potential easement, meaning that we have the option of sort of saying we want the easement in that location, and then the parties have to kind of work out the easement language. But it gives us the right to have it. It also demarcates it. It puts a legal description and a legal depiction, which clearly shows it. And they chose that in the interim, and that's fine, in the interim, you want to go ahead and put that. You don't know if that option will ever be exercised. So you go ahead and put an amenity in that area. It was not originally built with that development. And instead, they decided to utilize it, and that's fine. But you do that fully knowing that at one point, as parcel 3 develops, they may choose to exercise that option, in which case we might lose that. And from the beginning, when staff asked us to explore that, we weren't real excited about coming in and then our first salvo to our neighbors being, hey, by the way, we have a right to take away half your dog park, take it, you know. Could we have done that? Sure. But that's not how we wanted to start that relationship. And so as we explored it, do we really need to do that? And in fact, we spent quite a while reaching out to the View to explain, hey, guys, this is what's being asked of us. We really don't want to do that. Let's get in a meeting. Let's get on a call. Let's try to see if we can kind of work through that issue. And that's the first communication that we had. And again, it took us a while to kind of find the right person. And ultimately, one of our folks in Traumco Residential had a relationship, kind of reached out, was able to establish contact. And they said, well, we're going to send a representative to your neighborhood meeting. And we don't actually know if there were people that came, nobody sort of said, hey, I'm here representing the View. And that was the last we sort of heard of it, and there was no further communication on that topic. And so as we worked it out with staff, and this final issue came up about a turnaround, and that kind of recently came up, and so ultimately staff determined, you know, we don't need to have it after all. So it certainly was an effort to work through, and again, it wasn't a density question. Also, it was mentioned that the density in the general plan was 12 to 20. It actually says above that is what's being asked for, and we're just under 21. So losing density would start to fall below what the general plan is asking for. Also, as we, you know, Mr. Lasota and I were just able to, we actually found out on Friday that Mr. Lasota was involved, and so I suspected that meant that they were going to be here in opposition, although we didn't know that for certain. And so Tim and I were able to connect on Tuesday and just said, hey, you know, and we know each other, and so, hey, tell me kind of what the concerns are, and he would kind of walk through them. And then the next morning, I got a call. The client said, hey, you know, because of that relationship that had existed there already, he reached out to the View and just said, hey, you guys are opposing us, kind of what's going on. And in that phone call, he mentioned that something along the lines of, we're not excited about leasing up against you. And so there was you know, concern about having other apartments, which again, I understand if you're the only kind of game in town, but we actually think that it's a positive because as we strengthen Park West, it makes it more desirable for folks to want to lease there. It's also that, you know, competition can be a good thing. We force each other to be at our best game, right? When one of us can't slack on maintenance because someone will just go next door. So we actually think it's a positive for both of us. We think it's a positive for the area as well. Also, I would just note from a traffic perspective, I think this is significant, that in the 2013 study that was done for Park West, it identified a use generation or trip generation for parcel 3 that it would generate 4,105 daily trips. We are, the 2021 study that we updated for our intended use went from, so it went from 4104 down to 2476 daily trips. So the notion that Mr. Lasota is saying, well, there's other things they could do here. Well, there was other proposals that were sort of targeted into that 2013 study, which would have had more trips than what we're proposing. So I don't think that it is necessarily all about the trip generation. And finally, what I would say is that that easement that we would be utilizing to go out that center area is an established easement. When a seller goes to take a big parcel and start selling it off, they do CC&Rs. The declarant makes easements so that buyers know I have rights. And so that easement was established right in that area. We have a contractual right for that area. And as the seller, parcel one is, the owner of parcel one is selling us, he has a right to be able to go to a buyer and say, you have a right to get through this area because it was part of the contractual agreement that you would be able to flow through this area. For that parcel two owner to come now and say, wait a minute, we didn't know, or it's too much. Well, it was always envisioned that there would be users here. In fact, it was envisioned that there would be more users here. And there'd be no other guarantee that there'd be any other place that they would flow to. And so again, we also want people to be going through Park West. It tethers them to the users. We want them to be able to see the restaurants as they come in to see the shops. Frankly, I don't think it's a great idea to say, well, let's get them out of sight, out of mind. Let's keep them away from Park West. Let's keep them towards the north so they only see the movie theater. I think we want them to be coming through the shop and constantly be reminded of these are the shops. We want that tethering to occur. So I appreciate Mr. Lasota. He's a friend, and I think that this simply makes sense. And I think that there is no concern whatsoever with the density. I think the density absolutely makes sense. I think the access has been cleared by staff, and I don't see an issue.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any other comments for the applicant from the commission? Commissioner Fighter.
I just have one quick question. The dog park, I'm looking at an aerial, I know you don't need the secondary exit point, but if you did, is that dog park that they've built after the fact, is that easily, can you move it into the easement area if they needed to have that? I know it's a hypothetical of a hypothetical, right? But
Yeah.
that could be relocated if you guys did need that secondary exit?
What I can tell you is that it would not take up the entirety of it.
Yeah.
It looks like it would probably be, I don't know, about half. And I've got slides. I can show you detailed information. I can show you what it looks like on the ground. I can show you lots of different stuff if you'd like to see. But it would probably be about half of that if the full extent of the easement were utilized. And it's probably, I don't know, Tim, if you know, it's probably 30 feet long, give or take. It's probably the length from maybe this end of this table, maybe not quite to the wall, and it's probably about that shape. It's probably a little smaller, but you take about half.
Okay. But it sounds like it's moot because traffic's determined it's not required. So.
Yeah, and again, what I would say is that he has nothing to worry about. Either we have the right to it. I guess what I would say is either we have the right to do it, in which case it's a contractual right, which we shouldn't have to give up through a zoning case, or we don't have the right to it, in which case they have nothing to worry about.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? I think we veered outside the scope of the zoning application enough. Appreciate your comments, and I think we'll close the public comment period. Does anyone from the commission have any comments or questions of staff? If not, do we have a motion?
Chairman, I'd like to I move that we recommend approval of rezoning case Z04-19A.10 to the City Council, subject to the conditions of approval outlined in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Somebody not vote? Oh, sorry. Commission, please vote. I apologize. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll proceed to items 3R and 4R, which I think will be presented together. And just as a reminder, we'll take a break after 3R and 4R.
Chairman Alsop, thank you. As referenced, though these will be presented together, there will be two separate actions on them. So one for the specific area plan amendment and one separately for the zoning case.
Hang on one sec, Cody. Could we take the break now? Is that all right? We'll take a 5 to 10 minute recess.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll take a recess. All right. Appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. Break is over. Cody, sorry for cutting you off. Please pick up where we left off.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reiterate for the commission, as Chair had referenced, this will be a combined presentation of both the specific area plan amendment as well as the zoning case. However, there will be two separate actions that will need to be taken at the end. So the site you see here on the right-hand side of the screen, some of you may know as the former Smitty's site. It was a grocery store at this point, I want to say a couple decades ago, and had sat dormant for quite a while. Ultimately, that building has been taken down in a demolition process. But the site itself is the subject of tonight's item. So the applicant is Steve Addison with SJ Acquisitions. The site you see here is about 7.5 acres. And what they're looking to do is twofold. One is amend the specific area plan for Old Town in order to accommodate the proposed multifamily development, as well as a rezone from the current C3 zoning designation to a PAD that would allow for multifamily development. As we go through, some of you may recall that this site was before the commission not all that long ago, about maybe a year and a half ago, in a slightly different formulation. We'll get into what today's proposal is in contrast to that proposal. So again, what is being sought here is a modification from Old Town Flex Mixed Use, which kind of provides a variety of opportunity on a site within the Old Town specific area plan. What is being sought here is a residential density that's in excess of what would be allowed by that land use designation. As a result, they're proposing a change within that plan to accommodate the land use designation of high density residential within the Old Town plan. And again, the zoning change from C3 to the proposed PAD. So to the north, kind of northwest, Grand always throws off those directions within Peoria since it goes at the diagonal, but more or less to the north, you have a mixture of commercial uses within somewhat of the same parking lot of the existing vacant site. And then across 85th Avenue to the west, you have a couple of multifamily developments, Cedar Meadows and Villas at Montebello. Those are existing multifamily developments that are occupied today. South of the subject site, if anyone's familiar, Wagner Plaza 2, it houses Brothers Pizza, a sewing shop, a dentist, kind of a mix of non-residential uses there. And then to the east, you have an existing building for a restaurant, Don Lencho's, and then a chiropractic use. So what you see in front of you is what was in front of commission when this came up previously. Initially and under this iteration, it was in association with our real estate development office, and Scott White with our real estate development office is here tonight and can address any questions of market situations and fluctuations within the market. What we're looking at tonight is a proposal for multifamily exclusively on this property. There is no mixed use contemplated with this. It would just be multifamily. The buildings that you see here still try and evoke some of that urban form that was previously contemplated with the last iteration by pulling them towards the street, particularly along Grand Avenue. And then they did try and contemplate context-sensitive development standards. And we'll get into a little bit more, but just as a sneak preview, with respect to Wagner Plaza, you can see on the south end, there's certain accommodations contemplated for that, and then height accommodations that are contemplated to maintain context with those existing multifamily developments on the west side of 85th Avenue. So here you can see some deviations that are proposed from typical RM1 or multifamily residential standards. They're looking to provide a tiered approach to the height, specifically as it relates to 85th Avenue. So those multifamily that you have existing on the west side of 85th Avenue are relatively lower level. I believe they're both 1 and 2 stories for those. This seeks to limit the height within the first 50 feet of 85th Avenue to 48 feet to provide that context. And then beyond that 50 feet, it would allow for a maximum building height of 72 feet. So as you progress further away from the existing multifamily, the development would allow for increased height as you proceed to Grand Avenue. The setbacks you can see here, again, are tailored to the PAD. Wagner Plaza 2 has a relatively unique proximity with respect to parcel lines and the subject site. The rear access to Wagner Plaza 2 is currently from shared access point and drive aisle between Wagner Plaza 2 and the subject site. So this development seeks to accommodate a continuation of that access by providing a 40-foot setback from Wagner Plaza 2. So from kind of that southeast boundary, they would have to be 40 feet away before any structure would be placed there. Other setbacks would be relatively typical with what we would see with commercial development. In this case, we particularly wanted to accommodate the ability to plant trees along Grand Avenue to kind of soften that visibility from Grand Avenue to what could be a larger building. So just provide some pedestrian scale and design flexibility along Grand Avenue. All other boundaries for the perimeter of the development would have a 10-foot setback. So this proposal does seek to make modifications to the zoning ordinance as far as parking ratios. You can see on here, city established standards within the zoning ordinance in comparison to the proposed standards within the PAD. And something just to note for information for the commission, because it's not often the case, is there are stipulations within the staff report within Exhibit 1 that identify an opportunity to potentially accommodate those proposed standards. What we did is provide flexibility in there that says if a registered traffic engineer identifies that the proposed parking ratios would be appropriate for this site, staff can then evaluate that information and summary from the registered traffic engineer to determine whether or not it is in fact an appropriate proposal, or if it is not appropriate and should abide by the zoning ordinance standards that we have in place. With respect to open space, I had referenced the piece in between Wagner Plaza 2 and the proposed development as far as the access point and the 40-foot setback in between Wagner Plaza 2 and this development. The reason for that, again, is to provide that continued access and use behind Wagner Plaza 2 that is utilized today. With that in mind, staff attempted to kind of recognize that accommodation that's being provided for essentially an adjacent development or use by reducing the open space standards commensurate with the area that would be occupied by that access way or drive aisle. So what you see here is the Old Town specific area plan. As you can see, the site is designated there. It's currently identified as flex mix use, as I'd referenced. So they would be seeking a change to accommodate the proposal. And again, flex mix use does currently contemplate some form of residential. However, it's just not the density that would be accommodated by the Old Town specific area plan high density residential designation. So that's why they're seeking the change in order to accommodate the proposed development. And then again, the zoning change from C3 to the subject PAD. As with every zoning case, we did require a neighborhood meeting. As I referenced, this case has been in process for a while, so that neighborhood meeting was held on August 25th of 2020. That was held virtually, as you can imagine, with the time frame of 2020 due to COVID, and actually received quite a bit of attendance. There were 29 attendees. Comments did focus on parking for uses, not negatively impacting volumes on the adjacent roadways. So again, kind of back to that reason for the stipulation and further evaluation of parking going forward. And then the multifamily being context sensitive to the existing development. Again, the pointing back to the tiered height and the setbacks with the adjacent development. Notification was provided in accordance with City of Peoria zoning ordinance standards. As a result, staff finds that this amendment is in conformance with the goals and policies of the City of Peoria General Plan, and more specifically, the Old Town Specific Area Plan. And the density does align with the proposed land use change within that plan. For the findings for the zoning case, the design standards would prevent surface parking from interrupting the Old Town area, kind of internalizing it to the site. So again, bringing those buildings to the street, particularly along Grand Avenue, so that you feel you have some sense of activation if you were to walk down Grand. And the project provides additional residents that would be able to support small businesses within the Old Town and Old Town commercial core. As a result, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of case GPA 2004 to City Council, and separately recommend approval of case Z20-06 to City Council, subject to the conditions identified within Exhibit 1 of the staff report. And
Thank you, Cody. Any comments, questions? Commissioner Fider?
Thank you, Mr. Gleason. The current entitlements on this site that we approved last year, are they're locked in, they're done, so if they wanted, they can pull building permits to build the planned multifamily with the retail out on Grand Avenue?
So Chairman, Commissioner Fider, just a point of clarification on that, and probably something I should have provided more information on, is once that was heard by Planning and Zoning Commission, it ultimately did not go forward to City Council. It was continued several times as the applicant evaluated their position on the property, and ultimately the proposal was modified from the horizontal mixed-use contemplation to the exclusively multifamily proposal that you have tonight. So the current zoning on the property is C3. It is not the PAD that was seen by the commission previously.
Okay, as a general rule, I love getting more residential units near Old Town as we're trying to reinvigorate Old Town. I just don't like giving up retail on major arterial frontage for residential uses. So I was a big supporter of the last proposal, so candidly, I'm just disappointed to see it come back in a different form.
Commissioner Grice.
So just a little follow-up. What is the current number of units that are allowed on the property right now compared to what is being proposed? Gross number.
So, Chairman, Commissioner Grice, I believe what you're referencing is per the zoning today. Is that correct? So the zoning today is C3, which is central commercial. It does not allow any residential units on the property.
Any other commissioners? Thanks, Cody. Is the applicant here? Would they like to address the commission?
Chairman, Commissioners, Steve Addison, 4637 East Cholla, Phoenix, Arizona. Appreciate you guys taking the time to let me speak about this. Wanted to address a couple of the questions or comments directly related to the retail question. The original plan for mixed use, we felt that was appropriate as well to have the commercial along Grand Avenue. What we did after Plan Commission was submit a pre-app with site plan. And it was at that pre-app that we realized the accommodations we would have to make for the neighbors, which in doing that resulted in a loss of parking and forcing us to push the buildings forward towards Grand Avenue. In addition, we also have other projects in escrow along Grand Avenue for retail. And we went out to brokers, users, and we've been working on it now for at least a year, over a year, on Grand Commons, and at least a year on our other site. And we've had brokers turn us down for the listings. They feel that they cannot get the users. We haven't had a single letter of intent come through for a commercial user. This would have been a mid-block user with difficult access, given Grand Avenue. So the decision was made to move forward to 100% multifamily in order to support that Old Town revitalization.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Commissioner Nelson has a question.
I appreciate that clarification because I agree with that comment earlier. Turning over commercial for residential is a beef of mine. We do it too much in the city. And I understand there are economic factors and dynamics, and we got to take that all into consideration. You were shopping this around, and I appreciate that. That's during a kind of a weird time, though, isn't it? You were kind of shopping around during a pandemic. Is that something, if we gave it more time, do you think there would be a different outcome? Just because of the business climate was a little, again, just a little weird here in this last year and a half.
Sure, Chairman, Commissioner Nelson. So what I would say to that is our other site, which is actually the corner of Grand Avenue and 85th, so directly across the street, our current site plan indicates 3 available drive-through uses, which everybody knows right now, even during the pandemic, those are the things that have been successful. So in talking with the retail brokers, that's what markets want to see currently, and it's that site in addition that we have had no luck on, no LOIs, no progress whatsoever with users. The Grand Commons site was going to allow for 1 drive-through on our commercial, and the rest would have been in line. It's just not feasible. The feedback that we're getting from the users that have shown any interest is that you just don't have the core residents there to support it, similar to the previous applicant for Park West, where they talked about all of those restaurants in support of the additional residential. That's exactly what these users need in order for it to work. We originally came to Peoria to do a development in Old Town itself, to be a part of that revitalization. And when we realized that we didn't have the rooftops to support anything substantial within Old Town, we then shifted gears and started to look at the old Smitty site for this purpose in order to bring those market rate units in, to bring in that the residents that would have the income. Right now, we're looking at, if we have, say, 200 to 220 units, we're talking about an additional 300-plus residents with income of north of $4 million in total that we can bring to the area and support the folks at Wagner Plaza 1 and 2, support Don Lencho's, support the chiropractor, support K-May Donuts, all those folks that are around us, the coffee shop that's, Driftwood that's in Old Town now, and then hopefully spur that additional growth within Old Town itself. The reason why we are putting such a focus on the Old Town area and have multiple properties in escrow and have talked with the city about other sites that they currently own within Old Town and that they want to redevelop is that we see this as a long-term play for us. Grand Commons is an opportunity zone, and so that's a 10-year commitment for us. We're not a build and flip type developer. So what comes with that is our current pro forma shows over a $50 million investment in Grand Commons itself. So with a 10-year hold, we want to build a project that's going to be successful. When it goes to things like parking, we've looked at other developments in other Old Town areas, say Old Town Gilbert, Old Town Chandler, Old Town Scottsdale, and that's where we feel that what we're asking for is appropriate in order to make Old Town Peoria something more like what those other cities have been able to accomplish. And so with a 10-year hold, our construction is going to be better because our amenities are going to be better. We do not want turnover. That just costs us money. So if we can get Grand Commons, we can get the rooftops in there, then we can show the retailers on the corner of 85th and Grand, hey, look, we just got this approved. We're going to have approximately 200 units of market rate apartments directly across the street that will stop at your establishments and buy your products versus just driving down Grand Avenue at whatever the speed limit is and not pulling in and stopping. And then the ability with the pedestrian connectivity that you saw for them to go into the Old Town area and really, we've talked with the owner of Driftwood. He would love nothing more to have these sort of folks be able to walk down to his shop, take their dog for a walk, ride their bike, whatever it might be. Activate Osana Park. It's directly across the street from us. Completely underutilized. I don't know how many times I've driven out here, driven by. I've never seen anybody in that park. You got Theater Works across the street, a great amenity for the community. Where are the residents to enjoy what Theater Works puts together? So that's part of why we feel that, yes, in this particular instance, you're changing a commercial zoning to multifamily, but without these rooftops, nothing else will go. And Scott's here, he can talk more with respect to the Grand Avenue revitalization plan or corridor plan, I'm not sure exactly what they call it, but they've engaged professionals that do these studies to find out, okay, what's it gonna take to revitalize Grand Avenue? What do we need to see here? What uses are missing? What would be a benefit to the community? We have the results of those studies. I've seen the results, and I think Scott can speak more to it than I can. But one of the key factors that they came back with is you need these market rate rooftops, otherwise you're never going to be able to attract any users. So sort of a long-winded answer, but that kind of encompasses a lot about the project.
I appreciate it. I'm not a CRE expert, and you certainly are. So
yeah.
I appreciate the insights you provided there.
Yeah.
I certainly understand sometimes that's just the reality of the situation on the ground. As disappointed as I get, when we turn over a commercial property as potentially income producing for the city versus residential, which is not. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Nelson. Commissioner Fider?
Can you tell me the delta of the number of units you have in last year's plan versus this year's plan? How many additional units you guys are picking up by getting rid of the proposed retail?
Yeah, so last year's plan, I believe, was 156. Right now, with our current site plan, the fact that we're giving up over 19,000 square feet of space to 3 adjacent property owners for fire access and city services. So not only Wagner Plaza 2 with the 40-foot buffer, but also we need to provide fire access for the chiropractic building as well as the 2-story building that houses the tattoo shop, which is, you know, again, like Mr. Gleason said, directional is hard, but, you know, sort of the northwest corner of the property. So in giving that up and losing the additional parking, I think in our submission, we have a site plan that shows 221 units, but those floor plans are based on units that are too small, in our opinion, for the market, again, leading to turnover, which we don't want in a 10-year hold. And so we need to increase the size of our units, make them larger, and in doing that, reducing the overall number. So right now, we haven't gone through site plan yet, but we're looking at about 200, so delta of about 40, 44, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it's not a major, it's not as if this, you know, provided double the number of units by allowing this to happen. The accommodation for the other users, the open space requirements, the parking requirements, really is what is limiting the unit count. In contrast, we can't go to a 4-story unit because of a 4-story building. We did explore that option. The reason being is that we can't achieve the kind of rents that, as a perfect example, Park West quoted. Our rents are significantly lower than what Park West quoted. And again, the caveat being that we don't know what it would be when the project opens. But in this particular area, it doesn't support the same rents that a Park West would. So these are, while not affordable, more affordable housing for residents in Peoria.
Any other comments from the commission? Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Chair Alsop,
Yes.
just as a reminder to the commission, if there are further market questions, Scott White with our Real Estate Development Office can seek to address those for you.
Does anybody have any questions for Scott White?
I would love it if Scott can talk to us a little bit about the market conditions and provide us some additional insights. And that'd be great. I appreciate it. If that's okay, Chair?
Well, it's great to be with you again today. Hi, I'm Scott White with the Real Estate Development Office. And as Steve Addison mentioned, we have been looking at Grand Avenue in my office for quite some time, trying to look at opportunities for redevelopment. And you know, I think the question most I hear is why doesn't Grand Avenue redevelop? So if you look at the segment of Grand Avenue between Peoria Avenue and 87th, why doesn't it redevelop? Why can't we attract interest? And why can't we overcome some of the blighting conditions? And I usually answer that question kind of focusing in on 3 areas. The first area is development constraints. And I'm going to go over what exactly that means. And then there are market constraints. And lastly, what I refer to as other constraints in terms of property owner purchase price expectations, recorded CC&Rs that limit development abilities. So when you look at each one of these individually and cumulatively, they have a dampening effect on the ability for the market to favorably look at any of these properties towards redevelopment. So let's look at those separately. So in terms of development constraints, what kind of development constraints are we talking about as we look at Grand Avenue between Peoria Avenue and 87th? Well, you have vacant lots. You have boarded up vacant structures. You have deteriorated parking lots and deteriorated buildings. you have no landscaping or streetscape treatments, you have poor lighting, and you have outdated signage. So that's the sandbox that we're working with. Within that, you also have severe access limitations because of the Compass study. The Compass study limits access into those properties. So what you're really left with are mostly right in, right out turning motions. That too becomes a problem when you're trying to attract users because of limited access. Then when you also look at no freeway proximity, you look at some parcels are too small, too narrow, or too close together to adjacent properties to allow development to go forward because they become fire access or commercial trash pickup access issues. You have parcels that are mid-mile locations with no intersections or hard corners attractive to users, which is a big issue. And so you have perceptions of decline. And so all of that under the heading of development constraints, when you're a developer or a user and you can go anywhere, that kind of becomes a steep hill to climb. When those same development constraints do not exist otherwhere and other places. So then you get to, well, what are the market constraints? You know, why won't the market come here and invest? Well, when we did a market study for the whole corridor area, you know, we looked at a primary market area of 1, 3, and 5 miles from the subject site, which is the corridor. And so what did we find? So let's break that down by asset class. So let's look at retail first. Why can't we attract significant retail on Grand Avenue? Well, when you look at existing retail along the corridor, existing retail space today far exceeds local demand due to the presence of some big box operators. You know, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Target, Safeway, Fry's. You know, these big box operators are kind of sucking the oxygen out of the submarket. And so when we looked at, well, what's the retail supply demand forecast through 2050? Total retail demand for our area is about 842,000 square feet. Today, existing retail in that market area is 1.1 million square feet. And that's not taking into account new proposed retail square footage of around 372,000 square feet. So out of the gate, you're already over-retailed, dominated by big boxes that are sucking the wind out of any redevelopment opportunity for retail presence in our target area. So demand is insufficient to trigger new retail supply without new residential growth. And so what is our retail opportunity? Well, we know it's not going to be big. It's not going to be, you know, big boxes. You know, what is it though? Well, we do have an opportunity, and it's going to really be for small local neighborhood serving retail. It's going to be pads and inline shop space. You know, so it's not going to be big for all the reasons I just mentioned. You know, so we also, as part of our analysis, we look at a void analysis. And so what's a void analysis? What that really says is, of all of the retail elements that are normally found in an area, what are you missing? And actually, we're missing quite a few things in our little submarket area. You know, primarily financial services, but as we all know, restaurants and bars and bakeries and all things that are local neighborhood serving. Nothing that's regional serving. Local neighborhood serving, pad and small inline shop space. That's our target. All right, so we're not going to get a big retail presence in this area of Grand Avenue for the reasons I mentioned. It's just the market won't support it because we're already over-retailed. And we have parcels that have humongous development constraints. So let's look at office. Well, what about office? How can that work? Well, one, you're not on Loop 101. Most office wants to be either on or in very close proximity to a freeway. So you know, for visibility and access purposes. So out of the gate, we're in a competitive disadvantage. We have insufficient local amenities, restaurants, local retail services that office developers typically want in place to attract office tenants. Well, we know that we don't have much of that, right? So that's a competitive disadvantage. We have small parcels, which really drive towards structured parking solutions because of parking requirements. What structured parking is expensive. That's a burden on the pro forma. Limited access and visibility. And then when you look at just medical office, okay, so what I just said is on general commercial office. Well, let's just talk about medical office. Within our primary market area, we have 2.7 million square feet of medical office with an 11.2% vacancy rate. That's a high vacancy rate. So we already have supply, right? So it doesn't seem pretty likely that we're going to get a significant office presence. We might get some for Peoria Place, some smaller office pads. But I mean, that's what the market studies are telling us, So development constraints, market constraints, other constraints that I mentioned earlier, property owners that want way more for their property than it's worth based on appraised value. And we struggle with that a lot. CC&Rs that are recorded against a property that limit development. I'm dealing with one of those already for another property on Grand Avenue. They don't want any vertical development on a whole parcel that blocks a view corridor, and it's their property, their CC&Rs, we just got to work around that. So that's why redevelopment is so hard. That's why areas don't redevelop quickly and why we have to find ways to incentivize it, to make it work. And as the earlier applicant for Park West said, I think the quote was, to succeed, you need people. What we do have a need for is multifamily housing, and that multifamily housing brings people, and people bring demand, and demand drives other opportunities. So what are those opportunities then? If all of those things I just mentioned aren't on our radar right now, well, what could be on our radar? Well, a market rate residential development, including mixed use, where it makes sense and we can get some traction. But I think the retail presence there is going to be, pad restaurants. It's going to be inline services that are local neighborhood serving, not big, but local neighborhood serving, which we do have a need for in Old Town. And so, I think my conclusion would be that, if we want to really see Grand Avenue change, we got to make redevelopment investments and regulatory adjustments to assist the market in overcoming these challenges. Otherwise, it's going to remain as it is, would be my belief. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have on that.
Thanks, Scott, appreciate it. It's been a full circle for me. In this specific case we're looking at, when I moved to Arizona, I was doing my master's degree at ASU, and some of my classes were downtown Phoenix. Downtown Phoenix is a little bit different, but I felt like it was a similar situation, and ASU significantly helped move downtown Phoenix along by bringing people there. They moved the journalism school, they moved the med school, the U of A moved their med school, there's the medical campus now. You get people on the street, and what was considered a blighted neighborhood all of a sudden feels a lot safer. For that reason, I'm happy to see this. I think this is the first time we've had a strong enough multifamily market to support the location. Coincidentally, Scott gave a presentation in my graduate program 10 years ago, so here we are, 10 years later, and having the same conversation again. So thank you for explaining that in much more detail than I would have been able to. Commissioner Fider, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'll just be real quick. I love the idea of residential uses near Old Town. It's going to help. But Mr. White, your comments was we are targeting small local shop space. And that's exactly what we've given up here from last year's plan to this year's plan. So that's all I have.
And I think we have to build to that. I don't think we're going to get that with the first nibble. If we can move forward with a $50 million private investment and 300 households, 300 people, that starts a process. It might take one more of these projects, maybe at Peoria Place, or maybe farther up along Grand Avenue, before we can get the interest of the retail market. It's going to be a while because we have some stiff winds to overcome. So I think it's a progression is how I would kind of see it.
Any other comments, questions from the commission? Thank you. With that, we'll close the public meeting. Oh, you know what, I apologize. Did we have anybody that wanted to speak? I don't have any speaker request forms. Okay, so I stand by that, close the public meeting. Any other questions or comments for staff? All right, so we're looking at two separate motions, is that correct? So we will motion for each. Can we make a motion for both or two separate motions individually?
Chairman Alsop, it would have to be one at a time. You would
Okay.
make a motion, vote on that motion, and then make a new motion.
All right, so do we have a motion for item 3R?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we recommend approval of case GPA 20-04 to the City Council.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 4R.
Mr. Chair, I'll recommend approval of case Z 20-06 to the City Council, subject to the attached conditions and approval in Exhibit 1.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Please vote. Thank you. Motion passes. We had initially said we'd have a break. Is anybody, are we okay to move forward? I think we'll keep going then. And next, we're on to our new business for the day. Item 5R.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission this evening. Similar to the last presentation in front of you, sir, we have two items associated with this presentation this evening, a minor general plan amendment and a rezone as well. So we'll combine the presentation into one this evening, but it also will require two separate motions once we get to the end of the presentation and discussion. So I'm here to speak to you this evening about the Speedway development. This is an application by Benjamin Tate Withy Morris, who's represented by Jason Morris this evening with Withy Morris at the northwest corner of Northern Avenue and 99th Avenue. Specifically this evening, they're requesting a minor general plan amendment and to rezone the site to allow for the development of a convenience store with fueling station as well as a future retail pad. More specifically, they're requesting to amend the general plan land use designation on the 2.87 acres from mixed-use Main Street to commercial, as well as rezone the subject site from general agricultural to the Speedway planned area development. Taking a look at the subject site outlined in red there, as I stated, it sits on the northwest corner of Northern Avenue and 99th Avenue. It's approximately 2.87 acres in size. From a context standpoint, north of the subject site is a vacant city parcel that's owned by the Water Resource Department. North of that is the Prescott at Park West, which you may be familiar with, multifamily development that this body heard, I believe, about 18 months ago, and is currently beginning development under construction now. West of the subject site is the City of Peoria Pump Station, and then the new River Wash. South of the subject site is Northern Avenue, which is essentially the city limit, and then the city of Glendale. East, 99th Avenue, and then Park West, which has been a big attention of discussion this evening already. The proposed development plan is to construct at the northwest corner a 4,600 square foot convenience store with fueling station. More specifically, with respect to the fueling station, it's 10 fueling pumps under a single canopy, essentially one vehicle on each side, so it has the capability to service essentially 20 cars at one time. Also adjacent to and just immediately north of the convenience store site is a future retail commercial pad that essentially will function as phase 2 of the development. There are 3 entrances associated with the proposed development. One entrance off of Northern Avenue, 2 entrances off of 99th Avenue. The entrance immediately north of Northern would be a right-in, right-out with a full access entrance at the very north end of the subject site, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a little bit. I'd like to direct your attention to the exhibit on the left, the general plan. As you can see, the subject site outlined in red is designated as mixed-use Main Street on the general plan. You can see the traditional residential to the north, with the the park and open space to the west, the New River Wash. Directing your attention to the zoning map on the right, the subject site is currently zoned general agricultural, as well as surrounded by PAD with the Prescott to the north and essentially the Park West to the east. I would also note that the vacant City of Peoria site just north of the subject site as well. So when when you take a look at this, the general plan land use designation here, we're looking at it in a large context where you've got the traditional residential to the north, all the way over to residential land uses to the far east. But for the sake of our discussions tonight, I think it's more important that we take, really a closer look at the Park West development itself, as this is adjacent to it. It's separated by an arterial, but it certainly has a contextual feel to it adjacent to the Park West. Now, as we've spoken earlier this evening, talking about mixed use in Main Street, you hear a wide range of characteristics that go along with that. It clearly seeks, a wide range of commercial, office uses, employment, as well as residential. It seeks to capture, that traditional downtown development pattern, and quite frankly, more specifically to the mixed-use Main Street portion of that, it really seeks to create, a blend of housing, shopping, employment, and serve as a cultural, center of the city. So when you take that vision of that land use designation and you apply it to the Park West development, I think it's easy to see the success in which that development has evolved over the years. Clearly that, as evident by the item earlier in this evening, that development is continuing to mature as it's going on. However, sometimes there are unintended consequences, to those types of development patterns. And in a case like this, we have a small, isolated parcel, 2.87, so that's fairly small, that is separated by major arterials, and surrounded by a city pump station and a future water resource development. Essentially, as this is developed out, it's really kind of created an orphan parcel, on this northwest corner. And I think when you try and take a look at, the vision for the mixed-use Main Street, as we were just talking, it's very difficult to apply that on a 2-acre site, or a little over 2-acre site that, has clearly constraints that you don't find in any normal circumstance. I noted in the staff report, prior to the ratification of the 2040 general plan, this area was designated as commercial. That changed with the ratification and the update, to the 2040 general plan. In looking at the proposal before you this evening, we feel that it's probably a more appropriate land use designation, in that it provides for a wider variety of goods and services, and seeks those types of businesses that not only provide local but regional services as well, that are typically auto-oriented. And when you look at the proposal this evening with respect to the convenience store and gas station, we feel that that is a much more appropriate land use designation. I noted down there, I made the statement, future mixed-use opportunities, and what I wanted to really clarify that is by, recommending, a redesignation of this site. We're by no means, Park West is nowhere near built out. So the visions associated with the mixed use and the ability to apply those, to the Park West development will continue. There are multiple pads, as we saw tonight. There is, opportunity for residential uses as well as commercial retail, and that development will continue to evolve that way. In taking a look at the actual proposal before you, and really looking at the development details, the Speedway development is really most consistent with the C2 development standards. In fact, there's very little deviation from those standards. More so is the deviation is we took the opportunity with the PAD to create a custom set of uses, for the future retail site below, just north of the fueling center itself. And more specifically, what we did was we took a look at what was appropriate in that location, what might develop in the future, and eliminated a specific set of uses that wouldn't be appropriate in that location. As you can see by the south elevation, I've provided that it's got a context-sensitive architecture, so it continues that, to have the sharp edges and the wide variety of color and materials, and has that contemporary type design to it that carries throughout the site. From a landscape palette, I would just note two things. One is it incorporates an enhanced landscaping package on the corner there. More specifically, it continues the landscape package that was established with the multifamily development to the north, the Prescott, and continues that down to the corner. And overall, the landscape, it exceeds the landscape requirements by more than 15% on the site. More specifically, it celebrates the gateway nature of Northern Avenue, and with the, the future Northern Parkway. As you can see in the exhibit there that's noted as the Northern and 99th perspective, they've created a monument signage that, clearly signifies a relationship and an entrance into the city of Peoria, and has also added the city seal there in the design of the corner as well. And I would just point out that all the signage that you see in the exhibits and in the elevations meets all the minimal requirements outlined in the sign code of the city ordinance. Access and circulation. The traffic department with the city has reviewed the proposal before you this evening, and it's been determined that, there is adequate access to the surrounding network. As I stated, there are 3 points of access associated with this development. One via Northern Avenue, which is a right-in, right-out restricted access location. The second is the first right-in, right-out location north of Northern on 99th Avenue. That one also is a restricted right-in, right-out. And that's more specifically because of the proximity to the signalized intersection there at the hard corner and providing safe access in and out of that. The full access is just a little farther north on 99th Avenue. And it's outlined by kind of the T intersection up there with the red lines. This provides a couple of different aspects for the development itself. It makes easy access for fuel trucks and delivery trucks, getting in and out of the site. Now there is an additional aspect of this which was noted in the site or in the staff report before you this evening, and that is that, in order to get that full access that aligns with the Park West driveway, they're having to cross the city-owned parcel to the north. So they're currently working through the acquisition of a cross-access easement with the city in order to provide for that full access at the north there. As I stated, it's 10 fueling centers under one canopy. More specifically, what this development allows us to do is secure the right-of-way for future intersection improvements with, associated with 99th Avenue and Northern Avenue in the future as it becomes a parkway, a limited access parkway. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fire department, in their review of this project this evening. The fire department's an integral part of our review process. They're involved in essentially everything that goes through this. And I bring this up because there's been a lot of conversation back and forth. There's been a lot of apprehension about traffic counts and general traffic associated with this, and the ability of fire department to respond to certain calls, uninhibited, from the fire station located at 99th and Olive. And I just wanted to point out and state that, the fire department has been a part of this. The chief has reviewed this, and they don't have any objection to the proposal before you this evening. And I would also just add that there's currently a city CIP project for a signal at 99th and Olive that's 90% designed at this point. There is current money in the fiscal budget for this project, and you will see it happen. It should start, Chris, if I think I'm stating it correctly, we may see development of that signal start in 2022. With respect to public outreach, notice of the application and the hearings, postcards were mailed to owners within 600 feet and all registered HOAs within a mile. Legal ad was published in the newspaper and the site was posted in accordance with city requirements. A neighborhood meeting was conducted on September 21st, 2020, a month ago tonight, at the Holiday Inn there in Glendale next to the Topgolf. Typically, we would notice all residents within 600 feet of that. However, the applicant, in an effort to reach more residents, doubled the radius and went to 1,200 feet, plus a 1,200-foot radius, plus all HOAs within a mile. 8 individuals attended the meeting. There were applicants stationed throughout the hall to answer all questions that they might have. Sir, folks, there is a citizen participation report that's outlined and included in your staff report this evening. In addition to that, the applicant also conducted a door-to-door outreach. They actually hired a company to come in and go door-to-door in the residential neighborhoods north of the subject site. And really what that was an effort to, get awareness out there, solicit input, and, just increase the general awareness around the subject site. As a result of the door-to-door outreach, the applicant has submitted 15 letters of support, and via email and other correspondence measures, we received 6 in opposition to the proposal before you this evening. Letters of support, essentially stated, the lack of this type of service in the general area. They liked the high-quality architecture and the landscape palette that was associated with the design aspects. And they also recognized the limited land use options given the proximity to, the city pump station and the water resource parcel as well. Letters of opposition, understandably, they were, concerned with just the undesirability of gas stations on the corners in this area. And as I stated earlier, traffic in and around Northern Avenue, more specific to, public safety circulation, seemed to be a reoccurring theme that we heard not only at the neighborhood meeting, but also in almost all correspondence that we received. Subsequent to the distribution of your packets a week ago, staff has received additional correspondence, more specifically 4 additional letters in support of the project and 2 in opposition. I handed out a memo this evening before we started. Those letters are captured in there, and we will, enter those into the public record, and we will make that a part of the exhibit moving forward after this evening. When evaluating the totality of the proposals before you this night, the minor amendment, we feel, really does recognize the constraints on the current land use designation, and we believe that the commercial designation provides both local, is an appropriate designation in that it provides both local and regional service in it, and it provides support to the Prescott to the north and to the north and the Park West as well as it continues to evolve. And it allows for an infill development concept that supports, the existing business and more specifically, future redevelopment activities. With respect to the rezone this evening, we believe it provides an appropriate development program for the proposed use and advances the commercial land use designation in a challenging area. We believe it constitutes an overall improvement, and it will result in a contextually appropriate development that's appropriate for the subject site. And finally, Mr. Chair, the conditions of approval will appropriately govern the future development, of this site. So with that being said, we're recommending approval of the minor general plan amendment before you this evening, case number GPA 2005, as well as the Speedway rezone, case number 72008, with respect to the rezone that is subject to the attached conditions of approval within your staff reports this evening, Exhibit 1. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. Mr. Morris, the applicant, is here. We'll be happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. Commissioner Nelson, do you have a question for staff?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any objections to the gas station itself, but I do have some questions related to its impact on Park West. A lot of restaurants there, a lot of patio dining. Any concern by staff of odors from a gas station affecting the nearby restaurants with all the patio dining, which is a pretty significant element of their business model, because I dine there a lot. Tell me a little bit how we are managing that, what kind of controls are in place if we were to approve this.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Nelson, I think it's an excellent question, and it may be construction related with, the design aspects of, not only the,
Sure.
Water, sewer, but the fuel tanks as well.
Okay.
And I just don't know
So direct those to the applicant?
I'm not qualified to respond to that.
Okay.
But I think it's an excellent observation. There's clearly a restaurant right across the street. Used to be the Sandbar. I'm not sure what it's called now. Pardon? The Cabin. I'm not aware of, any issues they've had with the pump station. But certainly this brings it to a little bit closer proximity to it.
Two more questions, if I may, Chairman. The letters of support that we received, were those from residents or were those from business owners? Do we know?
Mr. Chairman,
And I'm
Commissioner
thinking
Nelson.
business owners, excuse me, I'm sorry, business owners in Park West is what I meant to say. Business owners in the nearby Park West development.
I'm not sure specifically where each of those,
okay.
Came from. And again, Mr. Morris may be able to provide some additional information on that. But I know that they've been in contact with them.
Okay.
And the owner of the Prescott at Park West was at the neighborhood meeting.
Okay.
And I've had numerous dialogue with him, and he's very much in support of it. In fact, they've started to work on creating a landscape buffer, between the two at that entrance towards the north.
Thank you. Then the last question, it's a great segue because landscaping was definitely a focal point apparently in this, and as it should be. I've had the pleasure of living next to a couple of gas stations, and the landscaping is pretty gorgeous when it first goes in, and then plants die off. They're not replaced. Falls in. It just never looks as good as the day one when they do the grand opening. What are we doing as a city to ensure that these landscaping standards are being enforced, not just a week or a month from now, but 2, 5, 10 years from now?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Nelson, that's directly aiming at me, so let me answer on that one. As part of staff's work plan, we are looking to evaluate not only the landscape code, but the maintenance requirements thereof. And so we believe that it's a very important conversation. So it's not only right tree, right place, but it's once the trees are in, how are they maintained? Some of that conversation involves a collaborative effort between multiple disciplines because everybody's fighting for the same space apparently, between traffic signs, street lights, and all things of that nature. So it is on staff's work plan to reevaluate what we do have as projects go forward. We try to be very careful in the placement of the trees as much as possible. We look at the species to make sure they're appropriate to reduce site visibility issues, things of that nature. But as Mr. Williams did indicate, one of staff's primary directives to the applicant this evening was this was a gateway into the city. And so we spent a considerable effort and a collaboration between the team in choosing to enhance that corner treatment area. And you do see that reflected in the illustrations this evening. So in this particular instance, we are very hopeful with what's being proposed, and we're going to continue to work with the applicant as they move forward in the process if this is approved this evening.
That's Very reassuring. I appreciate it. I mean, Park West is shaping up to be a real jewel, as I think it is personally, and I think it's worth protecting, you know, the visual aspects of that, and I appreciate the attention that was given to landscaping. Appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Yes, Mr. Williams, two quick questions. First one, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. The property, the City of Peoria property just north of the future development site, did you say that that would be a future water treatment site or a future water site?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, it's owned by the Water Resource Department. I think, based on the conversations we'd had, and Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure I don't think that Water Resources has figured out what they're going to do with that site yet.
I'll add on to that one. Commissioner Schaefer, currently, right now, the plan is that location is going to be used for a recharge facility. Ultimately, what that entails and if additional equipment does occur on there, that's something to be explored, which is what Mr. Williams is alluding to. But it is a recharge facility, which kind of begs the question, when we were looking at the land use plan, why didn't we kind of figure that out to begin with? Well, it's 2020 hindsight. You know, had we spent a little bit more time on the corner on the land use map, those two areas, the field directly north of this particular site, should likely be labeled as public use on that particular one. And so had we have seen that and recognized the existing conditions, we probably would have taken another recommendation at that point in time. So 2020 hindsight, lessons learned.
Wonderful, thank you. And then just a follow-up question. Any concern, seeing that, I mean, now that you say it's a recharge location, any concern with a gas station on the corner there and the underground tanks next to a pump station and potentially recharge station just to the north?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Schaefer, that's a wonderful question. We did have that conversation with the Water Resources staff. Ultimately, we wouldn't be recommending approval and an access through the site had we, not being able to mitigate whatever concerns there may be.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Steve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And thanks, Lori, for bringing, the zoning thing up, because as I first looked at this, I kind of felt like, yeah, this kind of feels like a zoning oversight, in my opinion. The corner, it's much more suitable for what we're talking about versus what the general plan proposes. And so I think this is a good approach to it. Would the applicant like to address the commission?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Jason Morris with you, Morris, on behalf of the applicant Speedway. Thank you for the opportunity to make a presentation tonight. And Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'm going to address Commissioner Nelson's questions because I tend to forget very easily. I don't remember what I had for lunch, so the idea that I'll be able to catch those questions at the end of this presentation are relatively limited. Commissioner Nelson had some questions about both the odors for the restaurant. One of the things that I would point out, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, this is actually a somewhat of a beneficial use. There are two things that we took into consideration. One, it currently is a wastewater pumping station, and there are some odors associated with that site, which is why, frankly, it hasn't been ideal for a restaurant pad of its own right in terms of retail, and why we think it's well suited for this use. But the other thing that was done was, as we were siting the location to ensure the impact on surrounding properties, is you'll see that the canopy actually runs parallel to the future Northern Parkway rather than the other direction along the site, so that essentially the cars are going further away. There are 10 dispensers. The cars are going further away from any of the Park West retail than they would if it was aligned along 99th Avenue. But saying that, as staff pointed out, and I want to thank staff, they've done a very thorough presentation, and they've been working on this site for about 2 years. This is actually something that started in 2019. There was a pandemic that you may have heard of in between that obviously delayed things, and also this is a very complicated site, both access-wise and general plan designation as well as the zoning. But during that time, we've had frequent conversations with all of the surrounding property owners, not just the tenants, but also the property owners, to ensure that there is support for this and that there isn't opposition, because we wouldn't have proceeded with this application over the 24 months unless there was that support, because Park West is a generator in this area. And we knew immediately that if Park West had any issues with this as a use, then we wouldn't have much success in a zoning operation. So not only did they mention that they didn't have opposition, they actually thought that it was a good use for that site. But beyond that, there was also the new multifamily residential north of us that was just going through the zoning process at the time. So we reached out to them to ensure that, again, that there was support. We've ended up working with them to create a landscape design for that edge between the two properties. And finally, there was a question regarding where the neighborhood outreach came from. And as you're familiar, planning commissioners, because you do this on a monthly basis, oftentimes the only people who will show interest other than the applicant in showing up are folks that are opposed or concerned for one reason or another. We recognize that to some degree it's hard to get excited about a gas station and convenience use. I mean, everyone uses these land uses, but no one, there's rarely a cheering squad for this type of use. So we wanted to go out beyond just the 1,200 feet that we noticed, because largely that was non-residential. So we did go out into the neighborhoods, the residential, both north of the site and west of the site, to tell them about this use and to try and generate support, frankly, to make sure that there was support for this. And we were fortunate enough to do so, which is why you have letters in your packet. So hopefully, landscape maintenance, if I can, Mr. Chair and Commissioner. With this application, there's actually a unique follow-up that I think allows the city a little bit more than the usual inspection with the landscaping. And that is to say, there's a future pad site that is going to be a part of this overall rezoning effort. That future pad site is just north, but will remain undeveloped. It'll be dust-proof, but undeveloped until a later stage. We don't have a user for that pad, although there is interest. So we anticipate that the gasoline and convenience use will go first. If in fact, when the time comes for building permits or certificates of occupancy on that second building, we have somehow been, somehow remiss in upkeeping with the landscaping or making sure that landscaping meets the exhibits that you see, the city will have a hammer at that time to bring us back into conformance, although we don't anticipate that being a problem. Because frankly, this site, as we'll discuss in a little while when we're talking through the presentation, this site is one of Speedway Automotive's first new builds in Arizona. While they're very well known in the Midwest, they are not equally well known here. Given that this is one of their first locations, given the gateway location within the city of Peoria and the direction we've been given by staff, but also from mayor and council about what this needs to be from a quality standpoint, the landscape budget alone for this site is 3 times what their other sites have been. So this is something that they're investing in to make sure it meets that standard and they maintaining it. So hopefully that addresses at least the initial questions. With that, as you can see, this is a rendering that I think staff used as well. I point out how reasonable the gasoline prices are, at least on this exhibit. But in terms of as we go to the next slide, the location itself, staff described this as an island. It really is an island. It's somewhat of an island within an island because we are bifurcated from the other side by city uses on our north and our west boundary. But we also have the New River to the west of us and arterial roads to the south and to the east. So it sits very much by itself, which makes this use an ideal use. I mean, there are very few sites for a gasoline convenience use that you would say, well, it's both proximate to the freeway, which is a barrier to retail users. Typically people who use retail want to stay on one side of the freeway or the other because of convenience And this is a convenience use. It's a convenience and very much a repetitive, habitual use for folks who live in this neighborhood. So we are an island to ourselves. We have proximity to Park West, which is a major traffic generator, but one that would benefit from having a gasoline convenience use nearby. As we go to the next slide, you'll see a slightly different angle. You still see the Loop 101, which just in terms of traffic daily use, again, we're talking that I believe the 2018 numbers were 132,000 trips per day on that stretch. So it's a well-trafficked area. You've got the northern on-ramp and off-ramp, but you also have what staff has pointed out in the staff report, which is the utility corridor that creates a buffer to the north. You have the freeway and the commercial uses immediately to the east. You have the New River Wash to the west. So it does stand by itself. Next slide, please. A slightly different angle. We've already talked about the location, just to give you a sense of size. Because we have arterials on both sides, the net is only 2.7 acres. It's zoned agricultural, in fact, has never been developed. And our neighbors are the wastewater treatment plant, the future recharge facility, as well as the mixed use. So we believe we fit very well in context, and not only don't have impact, any negative impacts, but we believe it becomes an amenity for the area in terms of the folks who still, and there are a few of them, drive gasoline-powered vehicles. Next slide. The general plan that we've discussed at some length, and again, staff covered very well, so I'll try and be brief. We are essentially asking to revert to the previous designation, which upon closer examination really fits this island. And while we look at Main Street, and there are areas for that Main Street that are perfectly appropriate within this quadrant, this site unto itself is not. Next slide. In terms of the location, because oftentimes when we hear objections, and I'm sure you have heard these objections, one of the primary ones is that we don't need it. We've already got one, especially if there are folks who live in the area, they'll say, we can get gas today, and therefore we're not interested in seeing another one of these uses. And while that is true, again, this location not only lends itself to that use, but between the 101 and the 303, there are no gasoline convenience uses. So this is not an oversaturated market. There are uses on Olive, but not on Northern within this stretch. As we look at the site itself, it's worth pointing out that it doesn't lend itself to residential for obvious reasons. And as you're looking at other retail uses, this is probably the highest and best use, although it's possible it could be another pad type use. Next slide. The proposal itself is for rezoning to PAD, which allows, as you know, through the city, additional restrictions and limitations of uses rather than just a general C2 use. It also amends the general plan, as I've stated. In terms of the design, I can't emphasize enough, we have had the opportunity to look at the landscaping and architectural drawings with not only staff over these months, but virtually 4 other departments within the city, because we are a neighbor to the water department, so they're essentially one of our neighbors that we have to please, as well as elected representation and the neighborhood. In terms of what we're building, this is the best of its kind. In terms, we would hold this up against any other similar use in any part of the valley. And oftentimes, there have been claims that certain parts of Peoria don't get what other parts of Peoria or what other parts of the valley get. So we've been sensitive to that claim and have, to some degree, over-designed this with commitments in terms of non-stucco materials and metal and stacked stone and cast stone. And then, as I mentioned, the landscape above and beyond what was required. The next slide is the site plan that you have seen and the layout that we've discussed. As we go further, I'll show you some of the conceptual renderings to the next slide. Those renderings give you a sense not only of the gateway, but also what it looks like from the various angles from which it can be seen. But I would point out, in terms of visibility, this is perhaps one of the least visible that is on an arterial to arterial because of the landscaping and because of the setback. Next slide. Some additional angles that show from really what would be the least attractive ends of this to ensure that we have covered all of the architectural sides, but also small things like making sure that the canopy supports our stack stone all the way to the top. They don't stop midway. There was no cheapening of the architectural materials that was used in the building itself or the canopy. Next slide. Also wanted to give the Planning Commission a sense of what that second phase looks like. We believe because of its proximity to the New River Wash, having some use that also has some outdoor seating is appropriate. Again, in terms of concerns about proximity to a gasoline or convenience use, we have planned this as either coffee or restaurant type use. So if there were any concerns about what would happen with the proximity to a gas station, this would be actually more proximate than anything at Park West. And we're ensuring that that is not the case because we own this property. Next slide. You know, I'm going to go through these quickly because although you're interested in the hot coffee, cappuccino, and milkshake and smoothies, it's also late in the evening and I know there are members of the public who want to speak. This covers much of what we've talked about in terms of the premium materials and elevated design, but I should also point out there's indoor seating as well because it is a convenience use, but as you've seen with the more modern convenience uses, it also serves as a lunchtime spot and sometimes a breakfast spot. Next slide. I didn't anticipate Mr. Williams doing such a thorough job, frankly, which is unfair because he has covered all the access. This is limited. In fact, the only full access point is with the participation of the city of Peoria, which would make it north of the site on what amounts to sort of a jug handle further north on 99th Avenue. But we have good access from both Northern and from 99th with our full access on 99th aligning with an existing Park West driveway. Next slide. You know, I want to reiterate the traffic and emergency response. I typically wouldn't do this, especially because we're a mile away from the fire station that is nearest to the site, and there are a plethora of examples of gasoline convenience stations much closer to emergency uses. But that was raised as one of the concerns and objections from the public. So that is why we reached out to fire experts as well as our traffic expert to ensure that there wasn't any conflict. Next slide. We've talked about the outreach and support. We're very happy with the support we've had for what otherwise is a use that probably doesn't generate a tremendous amount of interest, and if it does, it's usually negative interest. Again, I can't reiterate enough that the isolation of this parcel vis-a-vis any other residential use or single-family residential neighborhood and its proximity to the street network as well as the freeway system. So the last slide is our summary. In terms of why we believe this is a good use, it's supported by staff. Staff has done a lengthy examination of both the GPA and the zoning request. In terms of this site not only being an excellent use, we've gone above and beyond wherever possible to create a better looking version of what is already a good use on this site. On a site that we believe has been vacant for some time because of its difficult access and because of the nature of the zoning and its isolation. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have, and we'll certainly come back up and answer any questions that the public may have as well.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or comments from staff or commission?
Thank you very much.
We have a few speaker request forms. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We'll start with Pamela Green.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Pamela Green, and I'm a retired school teacher and counselor from the Peoria School District. I'm currently teaching at GCC part-time and enjoying my retirement. I've been a lifelong resident of Peoria. I actually was born in Arizona, but moved to Peoria in the 3rd grade, which was many years ago. Tonight, I'm here to voice my support, and pardon my hoarseness, for the Speedway project on 99th and Northern. I actually travel in that area a lot because I live in the area and I frequent Park West and other areas. I noticed that friends of mine who've moved to the west recently, when I travel from the 101 to the 303, there's absolutely no place for gasoline, at least that I've found. Providing a station in this area, I think, would be a great service to the area and to the neighborhood. Looking at not only the pictures of, excuse me, of the area and the pad proposed, it seems like a very nice use of that small space. After seeing these images, I like the landscaping, and I think it is an addition to the area, and I'm always in favor of improving, my neighborhood and the surroundings. Thank you for hearing my support tonight, and I hope you'll vote in favor of this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Catherine Gatros.
Catherine Gatros, 8940 West Olive Avenue, Unit Number 6, Peoria, Arizona, 85345. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission, and members of the audience. I am a resident in the Pine District. I'll be honest, I was highly against the Speedway gas station. I live in an area that's highly congested with gas stations. Seeing the traffic, just looking at the things of how people get around, I was very much opposed with this gas station going in. After hearing the presentation tonight by Mr. Morris, I really appreciate the fact that he took into consideration going further than 600 feet and reaching out to other people in the community. I was one of those residents that did attend the September 21st meeting at the Holiday Inn. Tonight I got a better breakdown in listening to Mr. Morris and listening to the general plan. I was highly opposed for this gas station. After listening to the presentation tonight, I second-guessing my opinion of being opposed to this gas station and looking how much it'll increase the quality of life in Peoria. Just a concern is the safety, just with the fire going through. Other than that, thank you for your presentation, and thank you to Mr. Morris. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate that. Wayne Baxter.
Good evening, commission members. It's a privilege to be here tonight. My name is Wayne Baxter, 9034 West Wimrock Drive. I've only been a resident of Peoria for 20-plus years, but I'm a proud resident of Peoria. And I'm a local pickleball legend, just for information. As a citizen and retired City of Glendale employee, I take interest in the developments and projects in the area. I was able to research this project on the website. I also attended that neighborhood meeting on September 21st. Very informative, and all my questions were answered above and beyond. Thoughtful, practical, and tasteful projects are exactly the type of developments we need in Peoria. This project will serve an area without taking anything away from it. If not this, then what? The space is limited with its potential uses. An upscale gas station with great landscaping will feel like it's always been there once it's built. Gas stations don't create or add any traffic. It's nice to see a project that makes sense and that so many of us can agree on as well. Please accept my support of the Speedway gas station project on 99th and Northern. I want to thank you for all the work that you do and the hours that you put in. We appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Those are all the speaker request forms I had. Does anybody else wish to address the commission? With that, I'll close the public hearing. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments? I think Commissioner Fighter, my screen's not working. You had a comment, Commissioner Fighter?
I'd just like to thank the applicant for the extra steps that they've went through. I know it's not the sexiest of uses. People don't love gas stations, but it was clear that extra steps were taken here, and so I'm just appreciative of that. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Second that, very rarely do I have people come in voicing support of a project. Thank you. That's refreshing. Do we have a motion for item 5R?
I'll make a motion to approve item number 5R, GPA 20-05.
I will second Commissioner Fighter's motion.
Thank you. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item 6R.
Chairman, I would move that we recommend approval of case Z20-08 to City Council, subject to the attached conditions of approval in Exhibit 1.
I'll second.
Thank you. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Commission.
Proceed to item 7R. Lori?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, the last item this evening is as minor of a major general plan amendment as you can get. And so let's talk about that a little bit more, if you will. This is a city-initiated application to modify certain sections within the existing general plan document. It's building on previous approvals, and the text is limited to the specific chapters as identified on the screen, which is 3, 4, 7, and 8, which I'll get into a little bit more in particular. As I noted, this is a major general plan amendment, and we'll talk about what that means briefly, but the purpose is to ensure that this plan remains up to date and consistent with the overarching goals of the city. So key things to remember that we did talk about: major general plans amendments are regulated more heavily by the Arizona revised state statutes. Our last approval was in 2020, and it was well received by everyone. So why are we doing this? A major amendment is subject to an annual process, and the general plan itself is a living document. So when it makes appropriate sense, we go in and request from a city-initiated standpoint to make major amendments to keep it up to date with regards to maybe economic conditions, policy changes, goals, and so forth. However, it's not limited just to city-initiated. There can be private-initiated major amendments as well. When those are triggered, they're subject to additional enhanced notification requirements, which goes through a 60-day agency review. We also open that up for full public comment as well. It goes through 2 commission meetings, and the first one was remote, which is why the October 7th meeting was offsite at Rio Vista. So let's talk a little bit more in depth as to what the amendment is for. So Chapter 3, it's a removal of Figure 4 for a reference, and that was the growth map. In particular, that was because the tiers of the growth tiers are very specifically called out within the plan in text. To try to encapsulate that in a map, you will always be out of date. So rather than always have an out-of-date map or figure within the general plan, what we've done is invited people to stop in or take a look at their favorite search engine or aerial, you can see where existing development is at that point in time. You can run the radius off of it and know which tier you're going to be in. And so that in itself keeps the general plan more up to date on a regular basis. Chapter 4, one of the things that we've talked about is POGO is expanding. And so we've made modifications to that chapter to reflect the expanded service areas and our efforts to expand the fixed route service and trails network within the city. But first and foremost, the primary reason why we're doing the update is we have reaccreditation of our fire and emergency department. So that is nothing short of a feat right there. And so to celebrate that, they did make some modifications to their strategic plan, and we wanted to update the general plan to reflect what they did for reaccreditation. So it's things like naming of the divisions, some certain goals and policies, and so now the two merge together once more. In terms of Chapter 8, there's an amendment criteria, so I'll read it briefly. It's a reclassification of a collector road to a local road deemed unsubstantial by the city's traffic engineer, which is to my left. Why did we put this in? This is actually in practice right now. We are simply documenting what current practice is and to clarify for those who may be questioning it. So all in all, chapters 3, 4, and 8 are significantly minor cleanups. 7 is just the celebration of our fire medical department reaccreditation. In terms of outreach methods, as I indicated, there's certain state law requirements. We've provided updates on our website, and we've completed a 60-day review. We announced major general plan amendment possibilities at a study session in May of this year. We had 2 open house meetings in August. We had 2 people in attendance. It's primarily for process questions. There were no actual questions with regards to the amendment themselves. Tonight completes our second Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We are looking to move forward to the November 9th City Council hearing. In terms of actual agency review, that is a significant undertaking, and I think we're close to 60 agencies that are notified when we do that. So it's no small feat. But in particular, Luke Air Force Base and ADOT did email us to identify they had no issues with the amendment, nor were they requesting any changes. It was just a reflection of those updates. As I noted, the open house, we did have a couple questions that were more process related. And for those who were in attendance at our last commission meeting, the public meeting was held, testimony was taken, but we had no speakers present. I'd like to think that's because it was so insignificant, it didn't warrant the attention. So with that, I know that is a very encapsulated presentation, but Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, with that, we'd like to recommend approval of case GPA 21-02 to City Council, and I'm happy to go over any questions you may have.
Thank you, Lori. Any questions? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we move on GPA 21-02 and approve these amendments and push them to City Council.
I'll second.
Thank you. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Seeing no members of the public here today, I think we can pass the non-agenda items called to the public. Any 8R reports from staff?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I would like to take a few moments both to do introductions. The gentleman sitting behind us right now is our newest senior planner. That would be Robert Kufis. You will be seeing him in coming meetings. So we welcome him. It is also a bittersweet meeting. We are about ready to say a fond farewell to Rick Williams behind us, who is leaving for additional opportunities elsewhere. So we will miss him greatly on that particular one. So with that, upcoming commission meetings, I would like to see you all back November 4th, regular meeting, City Council chambers. While we do not have development business that evening, We pushed back the design review manual conversation, and so that one is going to be a pretty lengthy conversation to get into the nuts and bolts, both from a single-family, multi-family standpoint, and time permitting, we might even dabble into some commercial and industrial conversation as well. And with that, we are also expecting a similar conversation November 18th. I will try not to wear my welcome out. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Rick, best of luck to you, and welcome. I lost my place. Oh, we're at the very end, unless anyone wants to stay here any longer. I'll close this meeting adjourned.
I just want to wish
Go ahead.
I just want to wish you well, Rick. It's been a real pleasure working with you on the commission, and you're amazing and talented, and whoever's getting you is lucky to have you, and we're going to miss you dearly. And welcome to the city. You're joining a great team, and we look forward to working with you as well. So it is a kind of a mixed blessing tonight. Good, but good luck to you, Rick.
Thanks, Jeff.